Can't believe it, it's that time again where we break down the year that was in television. Guys, we're nearly at Christmas. The shopping at this stage for me has been pretty much done. I'm just waiting on and living vicariously through Amazon delivery drivers. Um, the Christmas parties are being had, and we're looking back today at our top 10 TV shows of 2024. It is myself, by we, I mean, and also joining me is the man I've had so many great conversations with. Starting with this list last year when we did this tradition for the first time. And I've had so many great conversations about TV. It is the person I know who probably loves this stuff as much as I do. So no one better to discuss it with. It is the one, the only Kev Keane of Fan Club. You're very welcome back to
You,
page
you, you.
180.
Thank you
Kev,
very much, man.
to get us underway on this show, though, I
Yeah.
want to ask if you could describe 2024 on the telly to someone who'd randomly missed the year for whatever reason. Don't think too much about the question, right? But how would you sum it all up? And try not to give away. We don't know what each other's top 10 are, but try not to give away anything about your list. But how would you sum up the year in TV?
I could say it in one word for
Go for
my
it.
for my list, especially. Underestimated. A lot of
Okay.
shows that I knew were coming out that I hadn't particularly high hopes for or kind of good expectations for blew my mind. I think it was definitely a year of change or kind of just complete unexpected um gold, I think, as well in the especially in drama.
Mm.
I actually was doing up the list. I didn't really have a lot of comedy on my list. And I
Oh,
usually have a couple, but there was not that much in the way of kind of like there was no It's Always Sunny this year, there was no South
yeah.
Park this year. So there wasn't much comedy, but for prestige TV, I think it was a golden year.
Yeah. And like not where you'd expect either. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Because
completely
some of
unexpected,
the
yeah.
shows that we're like, right, that's going to be amazing,
Yep.
didn't have their strongest year. Like, and then there was other shows where we, like you said, no idea, or just like fell on our laps. And then someone's like, "Have you seen this?" And then you're like, "Oh my god!" And that's, I think, something that like when we go through, I'll go through my list. I don't know what your list is, but when we go through the lists, I'm like, I hadn't heard about this show. I didn't know it was even coming, and holy shit,
Mm.
here it is. At the end of the year, I think the word I'd use to describe it would be intense. Okay, and do you know what I was thinking of?
Mm.
Because I do a list of all the shows I've watched throughout the year, like partly to make this exercise at the end of the year a little bit easier, and just because that's the type of weirdo I am. But Kev, I've watched over 60 TV seasons this year. New, by the way.
Um,
Never mind like all the stuff I've rewatched, over 60. And that when I kind of thought about that, it made me think and kind of reminisce fondly over. Do you remember the years when Game of Thrones was the only show you'd be watching? And you just
yeah.
obsess about it week to week because that was the only new show that's on. So like I used to love that because I love being obsessive about shows. That's why I've got a podcast. But like I kind of miss that because like I love the concept of researching it and rewatching it multiple times over. So you get every last detail and then you're pumped going into the new episode and it becomes a big event. But I found that hard to do this year because there's so many shows on. Like part of that is because we're still catching up from the writer strike and COVID and a lot of stuff. There is a big backlog. Part of it is just because with so many streamers and everything else, there's such a like market for content now. And then I like kind of think about that and I'm like, Jer, are you moaning? This is the most first world problem ever because it feels like every single week I feel like I've got at least one show that I'm buzzing for, which is a great
Yeah.
problem to have. You know, if you're trying to find time for shows you love, like even right up until now, like the shows that probably won't make the cut because of it, but I'm absolutely loving at the moment. For me though, I would and I hope that does balance out a little bit more. You know what I mean? I want to get to a stage where we're all watching the same show. And like it's the big event, but yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, I still think you mentioned Game of Thrones. I still think House of the Dragon was kind of a big event still this year, but it was
Mm,
probably the biggest one that I think of all of TV. But like, it's nowhere near Game of Thrones still though as well.
yeah, and
I
and
think
and
we're potentially still in our own bubble, so maybe it felt a bit bigger to us. But like, there was a ton of kind of advertising and stuff around it, but it never felt the same as when Game of Thrones was at its peak though either.
it just wasn't like for me. It wasn't like we did kind of the Dragon Boys of summer, and like we were covering all, trying to cover all the shows at the same time. It was the Boys, the Bear, the Deadpool and Wolverine were out, and all those big fucking
Mm,
properties came back at the same time. And like half of the group chat, I remember the last season of Game of Thrones. We were doing Game of Low Blows, a kind of a spin-off show of the old Low Blows podcast, and like literally we had to create rules in the group chat, like for people who'd watched it, for people who knew it, for people who read the books and stuff like that. It's like if you've watched it, you can only communicate through voices and stuff like that if you're going to talk with spoilers and stuff. And then like
yeah,
you have to call out if you've read the books and stuff. But everyone was involved in those conversations. Whereas like even within the group chat of people we'd selected who are like TV lovers who wanted to discuss it, like half the group hadn't got around to watching it because they were like, well, I'm more into the boys, and the hour I get a week to watch TV, I'm going to watch the boy,
yeah.
So I think that's what's kind of happening now. There's so much good stuff out there that it's hard, and it makes exercises like this really interesting though, because who knows what's going to be on the list, and we don't know what's on each other's list to that point. That's
Mm,
part of the exercise here. So Kev, before we get to it, um because I do want to tease out the list in the right way, could you
yes.
maybe, as a way of teeing it up and setting it all up for me, maybe tell me something about your list without giving away anything that's actually on your list? So was there anything you found interesting when you took a step back from it and looked at it from afar?
Um, I would say that my list is, even though there's certain things on it hmm, from last year, they're not as high up, I think, as they were last year.
Okay. Okay.
I think certain seasons this year of TV didn't have as good a runs as they did. They were still good. I would also say that there is a big thing missing on my list from last year as well, and that is my Mike Flanagan fix in October, and we had
Yes.
none this year, and
Mm,
I, it's such a standout thing to me on my list that there's not really that much horror in there.
mm,
Um, it's like there's a certain shows with certain aspects of horror in it, but for the most part, there wasn't really anything kind of that really kind of gripped me that much this year in terms of horror.
yeah.
And I'm a big horror head, but yeah, um, that's a big omission on my list, I
Yeah,
think.
I think we both had the Fall of the House of Usher last year, and I think
Man,
we
I
both
loved that show.
I think we both lamented that it was the last kind of annual Netflix horror of Mike Flanagan
Yeah,
at the time. And yeah, that is something that's missing. Like there was like Halloween-y shows on that I think might make our list, but in terms of sheer horror, it felt like they brought back this really cool thing, and then now we haven't got it this year.
yeah,
In terms of my list, right, we brought up the Dragon Boys of Summer, which was that we had a content, explosion throughout the summer that it necessitated doing weekly shows and trying to figure out how we cover them all. And what I found interesting, and this wasn't deliberate in any way, is that actually, after putting so much time and energy into all of those shows, not a single one of them are in my top 10 or my honorable mentions. None of them. None of them.
wow.
Like none of everything on my list I found more enjoyable. And like I love those shows. If you listen to them, you're like, he was really into them. And I'm not saying that it wasn't, but there was just so much good TV. So which again is what I mean about moaning about the start. This is not necessarily a problem because there's so much amazing TV, but there's none of those shows are on my list. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
there's
gonna be
there's
interesting.
two shows that I think are on your list that I haven't seen yet.
Okay, okay, excellent. Well,
Yeah,
look, we'll see. There's a couple of shows we haven't talked about before as well on mine,
yeah,
and yeah, some interesting ones anyway. Okay, so we're dying to get to the list, and we're going to get to the list shortly. But first off, I just want to lay out some ground rules. First thing first is anything that can be classified as a TV show counts. Okay, you just have to explain why it's on your list. We were just talking beforehand, and we are like, technically a sports show could be here. If you wanted to put the RTE coverage of the Olympics, and it's like, now Sonia, tell me, why does she run with her shoulders and not her ankles? If that made great TV for you, then you can put it here. Fiction, non-fiction, reality TV, documentaries, animated, live action, like whatever it is, if it can be called a TV show, it counts towards this list. And I think that makes it interesting. I don't want to confine us here to kind of just talking to, there's going to be a lot of prestige TV. It is the most expensive, the TV people are putting energy into, and probably the most interesting, but it doesn't have to all be prestige TV. Another big thing is we're not going to spoil shows here, okay? The idea of this exercise is to give you something to binge over the Christmas if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, to kind of validate and explain why we love it, like, and why you loved it as well, and put words on kind of some of the feelings you felt. But again, if you haven't seen these shows, you don't have to forward ahead and kind of panic or anything like that. We want you to watch them if you haven't seen them, so we're not going to spoil any specific plot points. We may allude to certain choices made or like general ideas that were covered in the show, but we're not going to mention like this person died and this happened and that. We're not going to do that, okay? Because we don't want to ruin them for you. These are our favorite shows and we want to share them with you. Lastly, in terms of the format, okay? First off, we're going to cover our honorable mentions. They're not necessarily things that were like 11, 12, 13 in our shows, but they're just the shows that we want to talk about that we won't get to talk about and we want to make a point about, which you have to cut from the list, but deserve to be discussed anyway. Then we're going to get into our top 10, but finish it for going from 10 to 1. But the way we're going to do it is we're only going to discuss shows once, okay? We're not going to say, here's what I thought, and then 10 minutes later, Kev's discussing the same show. That's messy. We're going to go on House of Barber rules here for anyone who listens to them over at The Ringer. What we're going to do is whoever's show is higher on their list, we'll wait until the point that it's at its highest to discuss it, okay? To build a little tension anyway. And then we'll discuss why there's a difference in the list and so on and so forth. So without further ado, Kev, ready to give it all away?
Yeah. With my honorable mentions.
We'll start with honorable mentions, okay? And if you have something in your honorable mentions that I have in my top 10 or vice versa, we'll pause and we'll go one for one. So you could start with your first honorable mention.
This is in my honorable mentions because I've only seen 3 episodes of it.
Okay.
But I really love it so far. Is Say Nothing.
Okay. It is in my list. It's very much in my list.
It's in your list. Okay.
It's in my list.
I haven't finished it, so I couldn't put it on my list.
Okay, that's
why it's an honorable mention for me.
I'm going to go on a similar vein and talk about something which it's not possible for me to finish yet. Because there has only been 2 episodes released on it, but I'm putting it in my honorable mentions list for the end of the year because I like those 2 episodes that much and I have such high hopes for this. Can you guess what it is?
It's only 2 episodes. No.
If you haven't seen this, you're welcome. If you haven't started watching Skeleton Crew on Disney,
no,
it doesn't finish this year, so it's going to count towards next year's list. Okay. It is Star Wars meets like Amblin Entertainment. So E.T., Never Ending Story, The Goonies. It is that version of Star Wars that we've never seen before because it's proper. You look at it. First thing I thought of, I've spoken quite a lot. Me and Jerry are already sending voices back and forth. And it only premiered last week with a 2-episode premiere. But we're both in love with this show. And the first thing I thought of was Never Ending Story. And the first thing he thought of was The Goonies. And I'm like, and both of those, or E.T., it is fantastic. The kids are hilarious in it. It's just a totally new flavor of Star Wars. And it seems like it has seems like they have a story to tell. It seems like they're doing it right. So again, only 2 episodes in, very similar to yourself. But I haven't been able to watch more.
Is it set in a particular time in the
It is
whole
in
timeline or?
the Mandoverse, so there
Oh,
could be
okay.
crossovers
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and the characters we know from that world, but it is not
Cool.
written by Dave Filoni. It's kind of got its own feeling, vibes, and stuff like that as
Mm,
well. Jude Law stars in it as well, but we haven't actually seen much of him yet. And it just I watched that and I'm like, I cannot wait, and it is coming at a bad time for this list because it would do quite well. 2 episodes in, it's already getting a mention. Um,
damn.
but it is coming at the perfect time. It's such a great Christmas show as well. Like I'm like, it's
Yeah.
just positive, happy, funny, family vibes, but also an adventure as well. Really, really good. Skeleton Crew. Check it out if you haven't already.
Cool.
Your next
Okay,
honorable
my
mention.
next one on my honorable mention, The Gentleman.
Okay, no, not on my list. Go for it.
I loved the movie of The Gentleman. I thought it was great. It's still one of my, I don't know if I call it a guilty pleasure even because I think it's just a really good movie. I think it's one of Colin Farrell's greatest. He's only in the movie for about 10 or 15 minutes, but every time he's on screen, he's just gold in that movie, in my opinion. But then the Guy Ritchie made a TV show about it already this year. It's got Finny Jones and Theo James in it. The classic Guy Ritchie kind of characters. It's not directly related to the film. It's kind of its own kind of story about a guy. He's a soldier, comes back, ends up inheriting his dad's. Um, they're royalty. I can't remember exactly what they. I think he's a duke or something like that. But basically, in the same kind of premise though as the Gentleman movie, where they've got weed farms underneath their grounds that are they're bringing in money basically for the family to pay for, to upkeep the house that they're staying in. Um, and it's a 8 episode take on that. The characters in this though are brilliant. His brother is fucking hilarious in it. You got Peter Serafinowicz showing up in this as different Scouser gangs. You got um Giancarlito is it yeah, Giancarlito Esposito.
Yep.
He shows up in it too. Ray Winston shows up in it. It's a good gangster, modern gangster kind of TV show that's quite quirky and funny, I think, as well.
Okay.
I enjoyed it a lot though. I thought it was great. I think Vinnie Jones is one of his best roles he's ever done as well. He's a
Oh,
groundskeeper in it.
okay.
And he's quiet and calm, which he's never usually that kind of like he's nearly like the voice of reason a lot of the time in this. And he's
Okay.
very good. Very, very
Okay.
good.
I've had a Vinnie Jones void in my life. It's something that passed me by and I just missed it when it was out. So I'm gonna add it to my Christmas watch list on the basis of your recommendation.
Mm,
So I have that, I have Presumed Innocence, I have Day of the Jackal, and I have the franchise. They're the shows that I'm gonna be trying to watch over the Christmas because I always
yeah.
like to binge stuff when you're kind of vegging and just eating turkey and ham sandwiches. So yeah, exciting, interesting. Okay, the gentleman. My next one, we spoke of Game of Thrones earlier. I want to give a shout out to something which didn't get the love it deserved, perhaps because of a bit of resentment over the end of Game of Thrones. It's made by the creators of the Game of Thrones TV show, Benioff and Weiss, and it stars a lot of the same people. Liam Cunningham is in this show. You have, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but Sam from Game of Thrones as well.
Mm.
So you and it's got a lot of great actors, but they're not playing kind of their Game of Thrones characters. It's Tree Body Problem.
I actually thought this was going to be on your list. I've only seen the first episode of this show,
Okay.
and I watched it when it first came out with my ex now at the time, and we said, "Oh, we'll watch it again. We'll watch it at some point," and we never did.
Okay.
And I never went back to it. But I will though. I think I might do that over Christmas though, because I think that's I really enjoyed the first episode. Just never
Yeah.
went back to it though.
I recommend it. What I liked about it was it is kind of like it's one of these where they're going for another plot that they say can't be turned into a TV show. And
Mm,
when you kind of hear it, it's very steeped in kind of almost Christopher Nolan interstellar type of deep science on some level. Could this actually happen and stuff like that as well? And it's kind of involves like, you know, it like there's stuff happening in China that impacts over here that happened in the 70s, but actually it's only coming to pass now because it's got to do with space. And I'm not even going to try explain this plot because I couldn't. Even when I watched it and I was plugged in, I couldn't explain it. but it's not actually anything to be scared of because it's quite funny and charming, and they make it very simple for you to understand, even though it is quite high concept, and it's just really fun show. Like they let kind of Sam from Game of Thrones just be an arsehole in it, like, and he's fucking hilarious. Um, and yeah, I just remember laughing and just enjoying it, but it's also really high concept sci-fi at the same time.
Mm.
Didn't get the love it deserved. Netflix are going to give them a few episodes, kind of mini series to wrap it up. So it will get an ending, but it is not going to kind of get the full run because they put a lot of money into it. It just didn't get the traction again. I just feel a lot of people just resent the guys because of Game of Thrones. Don't let that put you off, though. It is an excellent adaptation and kind of reminded me, yeah, actually, we like these guys for a reason. They're funny. I laughed a lot during Game of Thrones, and they know how
Yeah.
to tell these kind of stories. So, it was a bit of vindication for those guys as well.
Okay.
Next up, what you got?
Next up on my list is it's a show that's not finished yet. There's two more episodes left to go. Um, it's an anime called Dan to Dan.
Okay,
It's on Netflix. It's fucking bonkers.
okay,
Um, if you liked Scott Pilgrim, especially the animated one, I think you might like it as well.
okay,
Uh, it's the opening episode. The whole premise is this girl and guy, through whatever circumstances, dare each other. One believes in aliens, one believes in ghosts, and either, yeah, both people don't believe in the other person's beliefs. So they get sent into different different, like a haunted house and a haunted, or sorry, a house that is like UFO activity and this haunted tunnel, and both gain insane powers in both of these things, and it's them battling ghosts and aliens for the next 8 episodes basically. It's absolutely fucking nuts. Um, it's got a granny in it that bites off dicks. It's got
you should have started with that.
yeah, it's got crab people, it's got weird fucking aliens, and it's fairly violent as well, but it's very, very funny too. And I would highly recommend it. It would be on my top 10 if they stick the landing, hopefully they will,
Okay,
in these next two episodes, but I am absolutely loving it. And it's got one of the catchiest theme songs ever. It
okay,
would nearly be
interesting.
like a good for Dan's intro on this show. It's
It does
Dan to
make a lot
Dan.
of sense. Dan to Dan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Literally, I've looked it up there. It's all one word, and it's literally Dan Dan Dan. Yeah,
Yeah,
so there you
Dan to
go.
Dan. Yeah.
And it's on Netflix, and they're releasing it weekly. They're not doing binge drops.
Yeah, weekly,
Okay, interesting.
weekly drop. Yeah, it's
Okay,
good.
interesting. Okay,
Very, very good show.
right. I'll consider. And how long are we talking? The episode was.
Oh, like 24 minutes.
Okay.
It's very easy to
Love a
binge.
24, love a
Yeah.
24-minute episode. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Speaking of 24-minute episodes, I want to kind of mash two honorable mentions together because it is two comedies which I've absolutely loved that again I feel don't get the love they deserve. One for more obvious reasons because it does have a big audience. And then one just because it's kind of gone under the radar, but they're both finishing up. Well, one has finished its final season and one has a couple of episodes left. I want to give a shout out to Young Sheldon, the final season,
Mm.
and What We Do in the Shadows, the final season, which is airing now.
I haven't seen any of the new season of What We Do in the Shadows, but I absolutely adore that show.
It is and what I want to why I want to call them out is they went with different strategies. Okay, if you think of the big comedy shows that we had, the staples, so like your Modern Family, your Big Bang Theory, your Brooklyn Nine-Nine, okay? For me, none of them stuck to landing. Big Bang Theory had kind of died a death. Um, by the time it finished, the joke was over. Whatever worked about the show no longer worked because they kind of Simpsons it a bit where they just kept going because it was so successful rather than because there was story to tell and it got a bit ridiculous. If you ever enjoyed it. Modern Family for me got a bit maudlin where again they're going to continue being a family. Like it's not the end of their family, it's just the
Yeah.
end of their show. So why is it sad? They're going to continue to hang out like so, but every episode's like it's the last time we'll ever do this. Oh my god, it's so sad. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of my favorite comedies of the modern era. Like you're probably talking top 5 all time. They fucked the final season, and it's not necessarily their fault. They fucked it because they panicked in the reaction to the George Floyd murders, and they rushed
I
out the
still haven't
final
seen that
season.
season then.
Yeah, it's on Netflix now. So yeah, it's they ruined it. Like they didn't ruin the show, but they fucked the final season where they just rushed it. They tried to apologize for being cops and spent half their time trying to be like really woke and stuff like that as well. And it's like just do the things we want you to do. Like stop like
Mm,
performing, like stop like trying to make a point and be like, we don't stand by those cops or whatever. Like, because by the time it had aired, the kind of anger and everything had died down. Like the defund the police kind of narrative was not a thing anymore, really. Um, and it just felt really out of touch and like really overcompensatory.
yeah.
Um, but what I want to give credit to these two shows is they're nailing the landing. What We Do in the Shadows, it's just giving you the show. It's a normal series of the show. Um, they're not trying to do anything fancy. And that's exactly what I want from this show. I want to hang out with these characters. Like, I'm gonna miss these characters. I like, sure, maybe I imagine in the last episode there'd be something sad or there'd be a goodbye or something like that. Fine, that's fine. But you don't have to make the entire series about that. Young Sheldon, on the other hand, doesn't get the love it deserves because of the resentment towards Big Bang Theory, because Big Bang Theory just flunked with so many people towards the end. But it was a really fucking good show. It was an old school, very simple, family-based comedy. They've done another spin-off from it about Georgie, Sheldon's brother, and Mandy, the girl he ends up meeting there. And they kind of go back to traditional comedy where there's a laugh track and stuff like that as well. It doesn't work as well. It's not bad. The characters are very good, but they nailed Sheldon's family. They made you care so much about the characters. They made you feel like you were part of that family. And what they went quite different because there was always something that I won't get into it. But if you knew the Sheldon character from the show, there was something that stood out about this that you were like, wait, I thought that what's gonna happen there? And they get to that and it
Okay.
fucking works. And they do get really emotional, but they get emotional for story purposes, not because it's the last series, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes sense within the confines of the story. And then you're like, Jesus Christ, you're watching it, you're like, I actually feel like these are my family. I
Oh.
actually, I actually care about these people, and they nailed the ending. Actually, the last episode was probably not the strongest because they actually started to include Sheldon later in life, and they kind of cut back to him and had a cameo. And you're like, I don't want that. I want to spend it with the character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the show just made me care to the point that when they spun off from the spin-off show, I was like, yeah, I want more of these characters because they're all a lot of them are coming back for the spin-off. And I just want to spend time with them because they got that kind of proper sitcom family vibe, the same way you felt strong emotions when you watch Friends, like they're your friends. This is a family comedy, really wholesome, really sweet, really simple, but also really funny with good characters that get you invested. And they stuck the landing, which was really, really good. So I want to give a shout out to both of those in their final seasons in my honorable mentions. Any more from
Very
yourself,
good.
Kev?
Um, have I got any more? I did a baby reindeer down as well as a fucking nuts.
On the list. On the list.
It's on the list.
Don't
Yeah,
worry,
okay.
it's on the list. It made the list. Okay,
Yeah,
good stuff.
I had to have an honorable mention for that because goddamn that show, man.
Oh, I want to discuss it. Yeah. The last one I know you've seen, I don't know if it's going to make your list. Mr. McMahon, the Netflix documentary.
I never even thought about putting that on my list.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forgot that was eligible for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would put that on an honorable mention as well then, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
It was brilliant. I think they nailed it. Um, there was the potential for it to get really messy. There was the potential for it to get completely sidetracked. Um, and there was the potential for them to kind of yeah the allegations. So there was a lot riding on this and a lot of avenues where it could go wrong. I watched it in 2 sittings within the one day because I was going to do a low blow short review in it, which you can check out on the feed if you want. Um, but I would have watched it in the exact same even if I wasn't doing that because it just had me. It both captured what I loved, what made me fall in love with wrestling,
Mm,
what made me uncomfortable about wrestling, tackled the allegations head on from the get go, had a lot of the same stories you've heard a million times before, not told too differently, but it's being told for a big audience that kind of matters more because it's on Netflix rather than on a kind of niche show like Dark Side of the Ring. Um, but told it really well with a good budget. They had access to all the footage and stuff like that as well, which a lot of places don't, and a lot of these kind of shows don't. Never came across as a WWE narrative. Like the documentary managed it. You had the people on the documentary giving the WWE spin, but the documentary managed to stay a step away from that and be like, this isn't what we're saying. This is what we're showing them saying. And we'll show them off the camera as well when they say something different. And
yeah.
like, so it kept its integrity and just gave me exactly what I wanted from this. I got what I wanted from this documentary. And I didn't think that was possible, which is quite an achievement, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, yeah, it's showed a lot of the stories we already knew to a mass. Like, there's a bunch of my friends that wouldn't really watch wrestling to the same degree we do. We're like, holy shit, did you know about this after they watched that? As well, I was like, yep, it's pretty fucked up.
Mm,
One of my favorite things the documentary does though is does some of the fucking editing though, man.
yeah.
It's so funny. Like with that, especially the question about Vince McMahon is he Mr. McMahon, is it a separate character from the real Vince? And he's like, no, it's a completely different thing. And then it
Yeah.
cuts to like every other wrestler, like, yeah, he's the same. You're like, WWE had nothing to do with it because of that moments like
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. And what I liked as well is that like you're almost worried about your mate seeing it because you're like
Mm,
WWE's got good again over the past year, and
yeah.
part of that is because he's not there, and it's coming to Netflix as well. And your friends could, in theory, get back into it. Your non-wrestling
Yeah.
friends or your lapsed fans, um, but also you're like, oh my god, are they gonna think I'm a weirdo for following this all this time while I knew these alligators and stuff like that as well? But
Mm,
no, it does. It's a celebration. It doesn't ruin WWE. It doesn't ruin wrestling. Its heart is in the right place in every sense. It's in that, like, it's sympathetic towards the victim. It wants to tell people's story. It wants to expose Vince, but it's not vicious either. It's not a gotcha
yeah.
piece. It just gets it right. It gets the tone really right, and credit to everyone involved because there's a lot to do there, and I think they
Yeah.
managed to do it.
Do
Anyway,
you, before we start
go
this,
ahead.
do you have, speaking of wrestling,
Uh-huh.
an honorable mention of pay-per-view of the year?
Wrestling pay-per-view of the year.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't thought about it. You must have one. If you're asking the question, there must be something coming to mind while I frantically look at the pay-per-views, the
I
pay-per-view
think
calendar.
just for the match alone, the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view with Punk and Drew
Okay,
was phenomenal. That
interesting.
match alone made me cringe in a way I haven't done in wrestling in a while with some of the
Okay,
spots that they did in that match, and I absolutely adored it. It kind of really made me just I was, when two people are like they're going at each other for like that long and they haven't been able
mm.
to touch each other and they got to do Hell in a Cell, that was a proper this is what Hell in a Cell is for. And they fucking brought it that night and I absolutely loved it.
It's really hard for me because, and this was always the case whenever I've done low blows, and obviously we brought it back this year. It's hard for me to divorce the pay-per-view and analyze it as a standalone entity without the experience. So the experience
Mm,
plays into it. Like if the party was great, I like the pay-per-view anymore. And other people might be like, that was shite. I watched it at home, it was shite. So SummerSlam was really fucking good. Um as well, because there's just so much going on. Like it started with Dom turning heel, and then you've got Balor turning heel, and then you've got kind of Reigns coming back at the end, and just the vibes and everything around it, the party just being back in Woodshed, like stuff like that. Like so, I really like that. I really enjoyed it. So, but again, the experience plays so much into that. All in as well. I was in Wembley for it. I know, like I had issues with seating that I kind of discussed and so on. But to be there for a big
and you
Daniel
had a good
Bryan
time with the crowd
moment.
then as well. Like
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of how the shit the view was as well. So
Yeah,
that adds to the experience.
but then being there for the Daniel Bryan moment and so many comebacks and
Mm.
stuff like that, it had a bit of everything. The card itself was amazing, so I'm going to include that too. Let's not get sidetracked and talk wrestling because we could for an hour quite
Apologies.
easily. Um, let's talk about the TV shows. Let's get to our top 10 anyway. Kev, I'll let you have the honors since you're the guest. Hit me with your number 10 and I'll let you know if it's higher on my list or not.
My number 10 is Agatha All Along.
Agatha All Along is higher on my list.
Okay.
So we shall get to it then. Interesting. Let's see if you'll repay the favor now. Number 10 on my list is the Amazon Prime Video remake of Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Not on my list.
Have you seen it?
Nope.
Do you remember last year when we did this?
And
And
you said to watch Beef.
I introduced you to Beef.
Yeah.
This is your Beef of this year. And it's
Okay.
actually a great show to watch at Christmas. Um, because again, it kind of goes back to that expectations versus reality thing that I think you're going to see a lot of in this list. And I just did not see this coming, that the Amazon Prime Video, which again, not like synonymous with great shows, it's synonymous with kind of great niche shows like The
Hmm.
Boys, Lord of the Rings, Invincible, and stuff like that as well. It does the niche shows very well, but just not the dramas and stuff like that. I didn't see their remake of the biggest fluff movie of the noughties, an action rom-com, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, starring Brangelina, being the early front runner for my TV show of the year. And then by the end of the year, it still stuck around to make the top 10. It's starring Donald Glover in the lead role. So that was perhaps my first clue that I'm going to like this at least a little bit. And that's why I watched it and gave it a chance. But essentially, what they did was take that really popcorn movie from the noughties and they turned it into this deep, thoughtful, beautiful, but funny and fun and easy to watch absolute mess. In the same way that, like, this is Beef of this year. Um, they kind of twist the concept of two assassins who are both assassins, but they don't know they're assassins until they're forced to hunt each other. It's not that concept. It's not a like for like plot. It's very, very different. It's kind of more inspired by, but they just used the Mr. and Mrs. Smith name. Um, Essentially what you have here is you have Glover and co-lead Maya Erskine. They're both getting married to each other and meeting for the first time as people who've been hired as assassins, and the Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing is more an operation as an excuse to send them to different places to be able to carry out hits. And
Okay.
that doesn't matter that much. You kind of get that within the first episode, and then like what happens is just that's a dramatic setup, and then it's just kind of a messy, funny rom-com that uses the plot as kind of a backdrop to just study a complicated romance between kind of broken and possibly incompatible souls, both trying their best to connect with each other and fill a void inside of them. So what you end up is you get a result, like as a result of it all, you kind of get like, for example, couples therapy where they have to work through issues together because they want to go to therapy and sort it, but they also have to lie about everything that they say to the therapist because they're secret assassins. Or you get kind of they're having a fight while they're sprinting away from an explosion that they started. So there's a bit of dark humor here because they're murderers. And if you've ever seen Atlanta, Glover brings a lot of the same people over from that show, and it's definitely got a lot of the same sensibilities there. It's got kind of an elevation and a cleverness to it that the original movie just couldn't dream of. Like, it actually feels mad to say that this came from that. Like, what? How are the two of these connected? They're just different leagues, they're different types of shows, and different types of stories and styles. The last episode in particular is sensational and similar to Beef. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger that I don't know if we're ever going to get resolved. It's been announced for a season 2, but that seems to be focused on similar to Beef, a new Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Donald Glover's role kind of up in the air. We don't know if he's going to be back for this. And again, like that,
Oh.
yeah. Regardless, sign me up because this is the type of show that just won so much goodwill for me and over delivered on my hopes. And like I said, it's just a really easy, fun, but also like intelligent watch. If you want something on the lighter side this Christmas and you haven't seen this already, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's on Prime Video. Check it out.
Class is down on my list. A
Okay,
new
so
list.
your number 10 was Agatha All Along. My number 9 is Agatha All Along. So let's just get to it.
Let's
Let's
just
just
get
get to
to
it.
it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, we've only discussed this, I suppose, recently,
Yeah.
but this was an ins when I say an underrated show year, Like this I went in with zero expectations to the show because of Marvel and how Marvel shows have been. But this show from the get-go was nearly like a sequel to one. It is a sequel to WandaVision. Let's face facts. But like, it just it hit everything you wanted it to hit and more. Like the casting were on point, the characters are amazing, the arcs were brilliant. It did this great thing of each dedicated an episode to each different character, so you
Mm,
cared about the characters now as well, which hasn't been done weirdly in ages in Marvel. Um, and it's just yeah, just the entire story of it from start to finish was it was one of those ones where I'm noticing on my list, some of them are binge, some of them are week to week. And this was a week to week show, and I loved the fact that it was week to week. I loved discussing with people what's happening, what could happen, who do you think's gonna die, who do you think's gonna get out of this. It was just the best. And it filled. I know it wasn't Mike Flanagan, but it was like that hocus pocus type deal of if when you're getting into Halloween, it's not like horrifically scary at all, but just puts you in a good autumnal kind of mood, I
mm,
think as well. And yeah, it was just brilliant from start to finish. It just went way, way, way above my expectations.
yeah.
And I'm so happy with how it turned out.
And we discussed this when we caught up. I think it was around September, and it was just before this show started airing. And we're like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
look, I like Catherine Hahn, I like Aubrey Plaza. Can Aubrey Plaza be in everything? By the way, I just want her in every show. She can like she was in Megalopolis, and she made her character work. That should not be possible. Like she makes everything work, and she's brilliant. So yeah, the characters were great. The casting was great, and we knew we'd kind of like elements of this show, but I don't think any of us expected it to be a WandaVision sequel. Um, I don't think anyone expected it to be kind of hocus pocusy either and work
Mhm.
on that level. But the show had me from the word go. As soon as they started that kind of Mayor of Easttown piss take, um, it's like, oh, this is a fucking sequel to WandaVision. Like, how did they
Yeah.
keep that secret? Like, it just, I don't know how we didn't think it would be because it follows on from the end of WandaVision, but we just thought it'd be just a pure spin off
It
and
was
just
like
something
none of
completely
the
different.
marketing even alluded to that,
Yeah. And
really.
it's
So
so
yeah.
confident. It's so
Mm.
confident because WandaVision was a hit for Marvel. It's one of the only TV shows that's really, really hit in the way that they wanted because of the gaps in quality and the inconsistency there as well. So they probably should have mentioned that, but the fact that they didn't just made it more of a pleasant surprise. I love the way it kind of played into the kind of WandaVision kind of piss take TV shows concept, but didn't linger in that and instead made it character based. Like it's a show that could have gone off the rails and it could have gotten lost in the lore of it all at any stage. But they had a story to tell and they kept the train on the track despite spinning about 20 different plates at once. Like, it never forgot to be funny. It never forgot to be emotionally impactful. But it also ticked all the requisite kind of Marvel boxes of like,
Mhm.
forwarding the plot and making it like these people can come into future projects and blah 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 blah. And every Marvel project these days, they can get 2 out of 3, but they never seem to hit on 3 out of 3, except for like the rare few like Loki and stuff like that as well. Like Deadpool and Wolverine didn't hit on all of those
No.
marks. Like it was really fun, but like was what who cares about the plot? Like what does it mean? It doesn't really mean it, and so on and so forth. Um, Shout out also to the likes of Joe Locke, Patty Lapone, who like how many times do you watch a spin-off and there's like the characters you care about and there's the other characters. And
Yeah.
part of me was like, that's what I expected from other characters that are introduced in this. And I'm like, you like how I've watched so many Walking Dead sequels this year. And they're literally they all spin off of from different characters in The Walking Dead, and every other character is another character. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh hi, I'm really kooky. Oh, I'm really evil. I have a strange foreign accent. You know what I mean? And it's just they mean nothing. They're just there to play off our main characters. But no, the casting with those two kind of being the stars as well as Aubrey Plaza, obviously, they made it their own and they kind of carved their own mark in Marvel and justified themselves being there. And then I still find myself kind of humming, down the
Yeah.
road, to
Catchy as
this
fuck.
day.
And they made like 3 or 4 different versions of that as well. He's
Yeah.
great, like, as well.
And like it's kind of like Hawkeye now. I really like Hawkeye, and it doesn't get the love it deserves. That's
Nope.
become like a little Christmas staple for me. I'm gonna watch that over the next few
Oh,
weeks.
100%. Yeah, me too.
Um, this is now a Halloween staple where I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch it, and I cannot state this enough. There's a recording of us out there just being like, "Yeah, we'll give it a watch."
Yeah.
That's what we thought. And this is what we got. Amazing. Amazing
Love it.
stuff. I did not expect this to be in my top 10. If you'd asked me at the start of the year, I would not have said it.
Me too.
That was your 10. That was my 9. So we'll stay with
Mm.
yourself for your 9.
My 9 is Invincible.
Okay. Okay. It's not on my list.
It's not on your list. Okay. I know it was half a season. We kind of got to touch on it the last year. Yeah, last year when we did this.
Yeah.
Because we only did 4 episodes. And then in January, I think it was, we got the next 4 of them. I love Invincible. I think it's one of the best things Amazon Prime has done. And like you said, they're very niche kind of shows. Um, I like the direction they went with these last 4 episodes. As fucking weird as some of it was as well to me. Um, but yeah, I do love the like some of the battle scenes even were and the animation in particular I think was just stunning this season.
Mm.
Any of the Viltrumite battles, Alan the Alien as well, his plot as well, is just phenomenal too. So I don't want to spoil anything in case people haven't seen it because I do I want to say certain things about that I loved it or that I loved that season 4. But if you've not seen Invincible at all, it's a huge recommend. And it's a very bingeable thing I think over Christmas too. But I just really enjoyed the second half of season 2.
Um, I I had a look there because again, like I keep a ongoing list throughout the year. Invincible was at 30 for me, which I feel I've done it a bit dirty there.
It's
I
half a
feel
season.
Yeah, it is, and that's why because I did enjoy what we got. Um, but even I remember doing the recaps with yourself and Dan every week, and we're like, oh, it's nearly over. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
4 episodes, and it just didn't have the bite. And again, like I know Skeleton Crew that I was talking about is going to be doing similar, where we'll get like part of it in 2024 and part of it in 2025, but we're getting it in a normal way. Whereas they just had a 2 month break in the middle
yeah.
of this, and I feel if we got all this like in one go, it's not as strong as season 1 of Invincible, but it would have been pushing the top 10. It would have definitely gotten at least an honorable mention for me. But yeah, there just wasn't the bite there. And it was just weird. And that's not necessarily the show's fault. I feel it's more Amazon's marketing of the show. And the show's even in the promo stuff they're putting out ahead of season 3, they're ripping the piss out of we're not gonna take
Yeah.
2 month breaks again.
That was a writer's strike thing, I think, though, wasn't it? Where they were like,
Yeah,
we don't know if we're gonna have a particular like how long a time we're gonna have between this season and maybe season 3. So we're gonna split this up, and it did work in
and I
its
don't,
favor.
and that's the thing. I don't even think it was like for our benefit. I don't think it's like we're going to spread it out for you guys.
No,
It was, we
100% not.
don't know how we'll have, um, if we'll have the content to fill out with a prestige TV show at that
Hmm.
period. And it made us feel very like consumers, which was not a fun experience. So that's why I missed it. But again, I agreed. I liked that. And I thought when it hits, it really hits. Like the last
Yeah.
episode was phenomenal. So yeah,
Yes.
it was. In a number 8 for me is another show I've discussed with you before, and I don't know if you actually went away and watched it in the end because I don't think we've actually gone back to it. I want to talk about Pachinko.
No, never got to watch it.
Never got back to it. Okay. Pachinko season 2. We spoke about it when the series had just began in our catch up in September, but it has made my top 10 list and it is my favorite show from Apple TV this year. Have you got any Apple TV actually on your lists?
I don't.
Okay, interesting. So the top ranked Apple TV show on both of our lists this year. for those who haven't watched or may not remember the discussion, Pachinko is kind of a Japanese and Korean with a bit of American show set over two different timelines. One is in the early 20th century, and the 1980s then is the other timeline, following a Korean family who are forced to kind of emigrate to Japan at a very interesting intersection of history for both nations. And then it charts the likes of the devastating 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, which I'm not pretending I knew about until I watched this, and then I researched afterwards in season one. But then in season two, they kind of follow much of their experience during World War II, and we leave season two where they're heading into the Korean War. So now we're kind of on history that we're very familiar with, and that really works for them. It kind of juxtaposes that history then and the racism and struggles that, again, we're not probably not aware of these kind of things, but Korean migrants face in Japan, or at least face during these timelines. The one thing I'll always say about Japan, I love it, and obviously everyone who knows me long enough will know that I've been there because I bring it up every month. But the one thing about the Japanese, not great for the old racism. Do you know what I mean? They're not necessarily, well, they obviously have had a checkered past with racism, but these days they're more very nationalist, and they're the nicest people ever, but you have to make the effort with them. If you go in and you learn a few words and you learn the customs, you learn when to bow to people and how to bow to people, and the right things to say, they're the nicest people you'll ever meet. But there's a lot of things like you can't get into certain nightclubs if you don't have somebody Japanese with you and stuff like that as well. Like, so there is like a very nationalist kind of vibe there as well. So it wasn't surprising there, but I didn't know that was a thing, that they hated Korean people for a while. And then it kind of juxtaposes the history of that with how it still happens, and it kind of focuses on a grandson of the main character from the 1920 storyline who's still around in the 1980s, and he's then trying to integrate all of that with working in a US based international corporation as the series begins. The second season actually grows past the source material. It's adapted from a novel, but unlike Game of Thrones that struggled without having that material behind it, for me this actually got better, because one thing that struck me about season one was that it's like, again, you feel very distant to the content. You're learning a lot in it, whereas you can't connect firsthand with it, so you're trying to learn through the characters and empathize, and it still works, and it's a really, really well made TV show. But focusing it on World War II is a subject that can kind of draw anyone in. It's like, yeah, I know World War II, I get it, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know. And like, I think it was really good. That the one tiny concern I had with the first season, that it felt a bit distant to a Western audience. It felt really good to have that addressed. Unlike, say, an Agatha, where the entire thing is driven by speculation and guessing who's going to show up or theorizing or this or that. Pachinko is a show I had to train myself to watch, as it's something that you don't think about, you don't theorize, you don't kind of wonder what's going to happen. You just absorb it and you just let it happen, because they have a story, it's history, it's confined, it's written. So you just have to kind of let it wash over you and just trust that they're taking you on a journey. But while it takes place during historical events, it's not about the events themselves. They shape the experiences, but it's very much character-led show. And the performers, they'll draw you in, they'll break your heart. You kind of root for these people, you invest in them. Their losses feel like your losses. You either understand every decision they made, or you wonder why they made those decisions, and the show will always kind of pay that off. And there's not too much else I can say about the show. It's just a really fucking good and well-made TV show, without getting into plot details, which I don't want to. Beyond saying it's one of those shows, another feature that it has is it has one signature kind of show-stopping moment based around a big historical event. What happened in Japan during the war?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's addressed. And it never lets you down. Like, it hits its mark for those. There's yet to be an announcement around season 3. That the creators seem pretty confident that they're going to get to wrap up the story then. And we leave it on such a kind of really intriguing note. To not get that would be devastating. So for me, I say, if you love TV, reward people who are doing it the right way, and treat yourself this Christmas and help get a third season green lit, because we need more shows like this to be made and succeed. That's Pachinko, and it's on Apple TV now. That's my number 8. Kev, your number 8.
My number 8 is another Amazon show.
Okay.
One of Braid's Fallout.
Oh, didn't make my list, but I'm so glad I have a good reason to talk about it. Yes, let's go.
Yeah, Fallout is another one of those shows that I had zero expectations for. It's a video game adaptation. We all know how video game adaptations go most of the time. It very, very rarely works. Um, because Fallout is a massive sandbox kind of game where like there's a story to it, but most of it's kind of just doing your own thing. They had a lot more room to it just to kind of do an original story here. But goddamn, did they do it really fucking well. The production was huge on it. They got the aesthetic just perfect. Um, it was funny, it was gory, it was incredibly well cast as well. Is it Ella Purnell
Yes,
as the
love
main
her.
character? Absolutely fucking brilliant in it. Like as a happy-go-lucky, just this person who's been confined to these fallout shelters for years and years and years, going back up into who that's all the life she's known, going into the wasteland in search of her dad. Played by Kyle MacLachlan, who I'm a massive Twin Peaks fan, and I just love that man so much. So anytime you get to see him on screen, you got Walton Goggins as well, who's one of my absolute
Yes.
favorite actors ever as well. I love nearly everything that he's in.
Hmm.
He just brings so much. So him as the ghoul in this as well, and his story was absolutely brilliant. But it was just comedy, tragedy, and just really, really funny in parts as well, and gory as fuck when it needed to be too.
Hmm.
Um, is it Aaron Molin, I think his name was as well, who plays Maximus.
Yeah.
Um, Also great. Um, just the chemistry in this show was absolutely incredible between all the actors as well. I just if you enjoy any of the Fallout games or just the whole barren wasteland kind of post-apocalyptic kind of vibes, I cannot recommend this show enough. It's so good, and I cannot wait for a season 2 of the show.
Yeah, it was 17th on my list. So just outside my honorable mentions and higher than shows that I love, like The Boys,
Mm.
Batman, Abbott Elementary, The Bear. I'm giving away stuff that didn't make it now. But shows that I absolutely loved this year. And so I loved this. Um, what I really admired about the show was that we're now in the space. I think in terms of video game adaptations, we're gonna look at it as people who are invested in that as gamers. We're gonna look at video game adaptations as in pre The Last of Us and post The Last of Us,
Yeah.
and it would have been very easy. And we see this happen so often in TV. How many shows are trying to be the next Game of Thrones? Um, but this didn't try and be Game of Thrones. This
No.
was fun. It was very its own vibe. I never played Fallout. It's one of those that passed me by. But I instantly just got into the video gameness of it all. But it made sense. Ella Purnell, absolutely phenomenal performance in it. If you like Ella Purnell, another like I'm going to sneak in a recommendation here. She also did Sweet Pea, which is a Sky Original TV show, and really, really underrated. 6 episodes. It's kind of like almost a Dextery type show where it's a really quiet, unassuming person who is constantly slighted by life. Decides, what if I become a murderer, and how does that affect it? And it's a very domestic kind of British TV show, a bit of a, like Ted Lasso meets Dexter. I'd put it, and she's in the lead, and she's fucking brilliant in it. It shouldn't
Yeah.
work, but it works, and it's really addictive. So, big year for Ella Purnell, and I like. I'm glad
Mm.
you brought that up because I wanted to discuss it. So, yeah, excellent TV show. Follow. Number 7 on my list. Another Amazon show. Amazon have done quite well here.
They have.
They're, they're
They've
what
they got a
we've
couple of bangers in there.
there's what we've done. This is our 7th, and what is it? This is the 4th Amazon show where it's talking about. There's only one Apple TV show. This is really interesting.
Mm.
Okay. The Rings of Power season 2. I
Yeah.
was fighting hard for you to watch it, and I think you were saying it might be one that you watch over Christmas. Are you saving it?
It's a
Yeah,
Christmas save for me. Yeah.
that's fair. That's fair. Um, I just rewatched the Lord of the Rings trilogy over the past few days, because we've got the War of the Rohirrim coming out this
Oh,
Friday.
next this Friday, isn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, I cannot wait.
me too.
And rewatching that brought home how successful this show was for me. And I had a feeling this would be the case, but it worked. It worked. It just because when we spoke, I explained that like I was kind of a Lord of the Rings or like, look, I'm really fucking nerdy anyway, and I love this kind of content. So I've watched the movies multiple times. I've read the books. I've listened to the audiobooks, which is quite a like heavy time commitment. But that's probably about a 6 for me on the nerd scale, um, compared to like a Harry Potter, or Game of Thrones, or Star Wars, or stuff like that as well. Um, and Rings of Power is what actually brought it all together for me. Um, because like it's not that Rings of Power is better than Lord of the Rings, it's that the weekly nature of Rings of Power just or having a Lord of the Rings TV show just works for my nerdum. It just suits because it gives me like one jumping off point where I can just study what does that mean for a week, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden I find myself kind of going, oh, teach me about the history of Numenor, or I'll start looking up Elvish traditions or learning about dwarf politics. And then what ends up happening from that is that it just enhances what I'd seen as good movies, but I just didn't have the lore or the background or kind of the appreciation of everything that went into it. I'd read the books, like, so I kind of generally knew, but I didn't, it wasn't in my heart in the
Hmm.
same way that a Harry Potter story is in my heart. Now it's in my heart because now it's just enhanced it. And when I watched it, like, whereas like I shed a tear at a certain scene or something like that, now I'm fucking bawling. I'm just like, because it just enhances and means so much more.
Is
The
it like
show,
certain stuff that's like mentioned maybe in the movies now, from this show, or
yeah, I
yeah?
appreciate it a bit more. Like the little things they reference that it's like, oh yeah, you were gonna go over here and blah 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 blah. Like is Isildur as a character in the show. So like,
Oh,
but
okay.
he's someone that they mention in the movies, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, Isildur. I don't know who that is. Like you showed me him for like 10 seconds, but like I don't know who that is. So
A
like, but
big
now
bastard is what he is.
I'm like, oh my god, now I get it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what he became, and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like it's, and that's how like this ties into this and blah, blah, blah. It's so cool for that side of it. Okay. But the show also has to work on its own merit. And this is the year that it really started to work on its own merit. It found itself particularly in the back half of the second season. And that makes it really exciting heading into season 3. In season 1, there was a lot of kind of cool stuff. But most of that was just kind of the excitement of, oh, is that Gandalf? Is it? Or like, and the theorizing around it. But it needed to stand on its own feet and work as its own story. And it's not a perfect show. That's why it's number 7 here, because the highs are high and I loved it. At its height, so I probably loved it as much as any show on this list, but that's not the experience all the time. Like there's it struggles to kind of juggle and balance everything. Like there's plot lines you don't like, they get a lot of time, and then there's plot lines that are less compelling or that are more compelling that don't get enough time. There's characters that you love that you're like, where are they? I haven't seen them in like 2 hours of like TV time. Or there's stuff that just doesn't have the juice. So they're trying to get that Game of Thrones style balance of like telling 15 different stories at once, and how do
Hmm.
they apportion that, and what do they focus on. But fuck me, when it works, it really works. I'll put it to you this way, and I cannot tell you any stronger than this, right? There is a battle episode of this season that I generally wondered, and still do, having watched this 2 days ago, I wondered, is that better than Helm's Deep? Did I enjoy that more than Helm's Deep? I don't
Wow.
know if I'd go as far as to commit to it, but I asked the fucking question. The season finale opened on one of my all-time favorite scenes from anything Lord of the Rings related. Like the writing in it is not perfect. The resolution and the character decisions and everything that happens make total sense. It's something that was built up for like all of the show up to that point. And the ending of it had me screaming at the television. And I'm like, I don't know if Lord of the Rings has ever got me to 11 like this before. And then the fucking opening credits play, and you're like, that was the intro. That was the intro. They just gave me "You Shall Not Pass," and then they're like, and now we start the show. I'm like, holy shit. um, like another show on this list I'll discuss, the creators and Patrick McKay and John D. Payne, they're both super fans, but they're also really talented as well. They kind of get what makes Lord of the Rings work, and I really respect them. We spoke there about like how many people are trying to make the next Game of Thrones. Like you have the Wheel of Time, you have Dune Prophecy, which I literally watched the latest episode tonight. They just don't really work, either of them.
Mm,
For me anyway. They're not trying to make the next Game of Thrones. Of course, there's comparisons. Of course, there's similarities. George R. R. Martin is George R. R. Martin because he likes J.R.R. Tolkien so much. You know what I mean?
yeah.
The idea of Game of Thrones is yes, but what is Aragon's tax plan? You know what I mean? What's his tax policy? How would he rule as a king? He doesn't like just because he's good doesn't mean he's a good king. How would that work? That's what inspired. So there is comparisons, but they're not trying to be Game of Thrones. They understand it's not all about battles or iconic lines or characters screaming and charging. That's there, of course, but you also have to show people and make people understand why Middle Earth is worth fighting for. You have to take time to have moments to get to grow to love these characters in the same way that when everyone salutes the hobbits at the end of Return of the King, we cry because we've had dozens of those little moments with them where we grow to love them, and that it means that much to us. But Lord of the Rings is also about so much more. It's about music. There's musical bits in this. There's original songs in this that kind of get stuck in your head that build a world out. It's about fellowship. It's about friendship. They get it. They get it. And like it's not only a show at this stage that every episode by the end of the season every episode was delivering. It was getting better and better and better, and I'm like, they're hitting their stride. They've got to where they were like, once we get to this, it's all killer, no filler. You know what I mean? In the way the House of the Dragon is kind of faffing.
Yeah.
House of the Dragon isn't on my list, but it's kind of faffing. You're like, get some fucking shit. They're in the shit now, 2 seasons in. But it's not only that, it's that the knock-on effect it's now had on me that I've got to live through. Like I am fucking dying for Water here this week. I loved every second of watching the Lord of the Rings movies. It wasn't a slog in the way that trying to fit time for a 4 hour movie. Even if you love it and it's a great movie, it can be difficult to watch a Lord of the Rings movie sometimes, especially in one sitting. Um,
Is it
it's
though?
a yeah, but
Joking.
like yeah,
I'm
but
joking.
it's just a massive success. Um,
Yeah,
that doesn't get the credit it deserves. And I'm jealous of you getting to watch this Christmas because it's a perfect Christmas show, and I think you're gonna love it.
I can't wait. Lord of the Rings is
Right.
such a Christmas kind of thing for me
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Would you recommend watching this before I marathon Lord of the Rings at some point over Christmas?
Yeah, because then there'll be bits that'll resonate within
It'll
Lord
res
of the
okay.
Rings. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely would. Like, and it's tough because like I kind of it is great to binge, but also it's great to watch weekly and then do your little research and go away and go, oh, and why is it
Mm.
like that? Because they really get into the nerdy side. They really, really get into the nerdy side. Like in the first season, I'm like, I can't believe that this show has got this much money behind it, and it feels like it's just made to answer questions from me. Like it's so in the weeds, and it's just interesting. But they're not afraid to also take a swing and change things up a little bit as well. Like so, it's cool. Let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to those discussions. That's
Yeah.
my number seven. Kev, what's on your number seven?
Now I haven't watched as much TV as you this year, clearly.
Okay.
I think I had more of a movie year.
Okay.
And I was going through my list and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna put this here because I didn't love this season as much as other seasons. But The Boys is number seven on my list.
Okay. That made
Um,
it.
I did have I had a really good time, I think, watching most of this season. I think the writing was not on point this season at
Mhm.
all. Especially that sheep episode, I thought was a bit fucking ridiculous and stupid, even by the boys' standards.
But I'm
Um,
laughing as I'm remembering it at the same time. I do not
um,
think we should fuck that sheep.
yeah. But there was a couple of plots, especially Frenchie's plot this season was a bit meh.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I had a good time for the most part, watching this week to week, and especially, do you know what? I'm probably got a bit of rose tinted glasses on here because we did the whole Dragon Boys of Summer, and I absolutely love discussing that week to week with you and Dan as well. Um, I thought it was really, really good, like in that sense too. But yeah, it's look, season three of the boys. No, sorry, season four of the boys. Um, it suffered from not seeing. If you haven't seen Gen V, I think that's essential watching, and I
Hmm.
don't think a lot of people knew about that.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people that I had talked to about the boys had not seen Gen V and were lost with some of it, and I think that let the season down. I think a little bit too. Yeah, just it was just some of the plot points were just not as good as they could have been.
I don't feel like you have to qualify this because it sounds like you didn't like it as much as some of the shows that you've already listed. Like
I'm
I
trying to
don't.
get I'm trying to get the bad out of the way
Okay.
because when I
Okay.
what I did love like when that show hits, it just hits. It's
Yeah.
just it's fun.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, even though I do like a spoiler that House of the Dragon is on my list at some point,
Okay.
I think I did prefer the boys week to week over it in terms of an entertainment thing. But then there's another part that I'll get to when we talk about House of the Dragon that I think qualified it being higher. But
Hmm.
I think for a pure silly dumb watch every week, I was never not entertained, bar anything to do with Frenchie.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I don't hate it. And like I'm very happy for you as well, because your last three picks have been Invincible, Fallout, and The Boys. You have gotten your money's worth from Amazon this year. Well done, beating the system.
Yeah, that is
Fuck you.
true.
Fuck you, Jeff Bezos. Kev has got your number.
I'll have the rings of power as well. So
Yeah, you got that to catch up on too. But like, yeah, I don't hate that pick, even though it's not mine. I like like the boys was 18 on my list.
yeah,
So it's not like that I didn't like it by any means. Like that's I love say the top 25 to 30 shows. I really had a great time with all of them. At one point. It wasn't the perfect season, it wasn't the strongest season of the boys, but when it hit the Homelander episode, I think when he went back to the lab that he'd been kind of ground. Like, fuck
yes,
me, that's iconic. The finale was excellent. Like, I remember just watching the finale. I'm like, it's okay. They got it right. They got it right in the end. That's fine.
yeah,
Um, because it just, I don't know, the experience of the season and it being released weekly. I think again, Amazon release schedules kind of do like they released with 3 episodes and none of them were home runs. So first off, they're making you essentially experience the runtime of a Lord of the Rings movie, and if you're not knocking it out of the park in 3 hours of my time, then I'm worried about you. Do you know what I mean? But if they had released it maybe weekly, I would have probably had a bit more time because it left me wanting more instead of like overloading me with shit. And
mm,
then, so a lot of my boys' experience was clouded by just concern. Like, is this show going off the rails? Is this it? And then they won me back with the last episode. So now I view it completely differently, where I'm like, no, it's fine. We're in a good spot. We're heading into the last series. So,
yeah,
I'm not worried about the boys. It was the weakest season that they've had, and I include Gen V in that as well. Um, but there's always enough to like about it, and I think there's still enough on the rails. I think the Trump knowing they were like I think knowing that they were releasing in an election cycle when they'd be deep into it, I think that
yeah,
threw them a little bit. And I think that threw the writing because I think they felt the need to make it ultra political in a way that that's not why we come to the boys. Um, like again, I'm not coming for like, don't tell me how to feel about America. Tell me how to feel about superheroes. The purpose of this show, the thing that sold me on this show is superheroes would actually be cunts in real life. I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, they would actually. I'm like, yeah, it's a great point. And tell me more about that rather than going, oh, well, what if Donald Trump did this? I'm like, just
Yeah.
stop trying to be too clever. Like, but again, they got me back because they got back to focusing on the real stuff by the end. So yeah, I don't hate that pick at all.
I think they had some they did have some good character arcs this season, like especially with A Train. I thought his story this season was actually
Yes.
brilliant.
What was the
Um
movie that they wanted to do with Will Ferrell? Ferrell
uh
Streep.
what the hell was that called again? That was absolute gold. Like
Yes. I love the
Oh,
content that they do. Like the bits
yeah.
like that are fucking genius. The little sub content pieces, and their social media as well is just very clever because they keep updating like stuff like that throughout the year, even when they're off. Like I love the world. I'm looking forward to Gen V season 2 this year. Um,
Training A train.
yes, that's the one. Um, oh, when they did the reveal with the deep, where it's like this is phase 19 of the boys universe, and it's
Yeah.
just absolute shite, like, and it's like, yeah, shit, you've really got Marvel there, like,
Yeah, that was
I'm
very good.
like, it's so real, like, but yeah, in a number 6, this is where I have Baby Reindeer, and
Okay.
it's tough to discuss this show now and not feel a bit tainted by the kind of discourse that's overwhelmed the
Mm,
discussion of the show and a bit of recklessness by Netflix here and those who
yeah.
made it like to blatantly call it a true story and then have so much identifying info of Fiona Harvey included in it as Martha while also taking a lot of artistic swings with the truth that it's very clearly also saying are 100% true. So that was irresponsible. And I think we can just step back enough from the show and go, yeah, you fucked it there, lads. But that's not the show that we watch. That's not the show we experience. That's the aftermath of the show, okay?
Mm.
And it's kind of a separate discussion because, like I said, the experience we had watching it was very, very different. It's not my highest rated Netflix show, but it is the epitome of what we consider a Netflix show and what we go to Netflix to experience. It is like all of the best parts of that. It's kind of trashy. It's also stylish and really tightly made at the same time. It's got likable characters and actors that you feel like um and it's really bingeable as well. Like it kind of feels like if you had the time, you'd watch it all in one sitting. Like it's the
I
perfect.
I disagree completely.
Okay,
I felt it. I felt so uncomfortable in certain, and like it's honest. It's just that cringe, like The Office kind of thing, where like
right,
I
yeah, that's
can't,
fair.
like it's like I can't watch maybe two of those in a row. It just made me feel a bit ill inside.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay. I have a friend who's very similar about the bear. Like, and it's not about the show. It's not saying that there's something wrong with the
yeah,
show. It's just that it's so fucking triggering and
intense
stressful.
and yeah.
Yeah. So I get that. I legitimately would have watched it. I think I watched it in 2 sittings, and I wanted more. Like, um,
Mm.
but the biggest credit I can kind of give to Baby Reindeer is that, like so many other shows on this, it had zero hype even in the industry, even with people like you and me who follow along with kind of these type of things, even when it drops, like I hadn't even heard of this when my then girlfriend recommended it to me. And it's possibly the one show on this list where we don't need to get into here's what this show's about if you haven't seen it. Because I'd be willing to bet that every single person who's listening to this or watching this right now has seen it all. Every
Yeah.
single person. It became the biggest show. Yes,
And if you haven't, you know the story
yeah, you know it.
from the
You've heard it.
Fallout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Richard Gadd may have bent the truth for the sake of a better story. And from a purely artistic point of view, not a legal one, I actually can't fault a single decision he made from telling a good story. If we're just looking at it through that lens, it's Netflix's job to be careful about what goes out and make sure that it's legally compliant.
Mhm.
He's not turning around. He didn't, I don't think he tricked Netflix here, you know what I mean, or pulled a fast one or anything like that. He just went to tell a good story, like, and make a good TV show. It may be the most honest biographical show I've ever seen. Like, I couldn't take my eyes off the show for a second and would be literally screaming at the screen at times, going, "What are you doing?" Like, literally, right up until the credits rolled in the last episode, I'm still
Yeah.
like, "Why are you? What are you doing? Stop! Just stop!" And like, how he put himself out there as an accomplice in like his own demise and then kind of went back and doubled back in a flashback episode that was excellent and then explained this is why I'm self-destructive, you know. But even after he kind of understood that and acknowledged that about himself, it didn't change it. And that's very true to life. It's like you can go to therapy, but you're not just going to go to one therapy session and I'm a new person, all of my problems are fixed. You know, you continue to kind of deal with that and struggle. And it just felt so refreshing to watch that level of self-awareness and vulnerability in a show like this that's got so much of the familiar beats that we're kind of used to of various other shows. And at the same time, you're kind of watching it between your hands. And I don't know if you were thinking this, but I'm like, he's playing himself here. Like,
Yeah, there
whatever
was.
is true about this, I'm like he is reliving some of the most traumatic scenes of his life. And I
Yeah.
just kept thinking about the onset experience for him. It's like, right, okay, we're just gonna do another take of the time you were raped. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, fuck, like what is that like? Like, and but we're getting to watch the end products. Like, it's just such a window into his soul. He's letting us into his most intimate internal thoughts, like that nobody's meant to hear and nobody's meant to experience. The moments in the pub by himself where he's listening to a voicemail or something, and it's like, you don't ever tell your best friend or family about that. Never mind put it on Netflix, like, and he's just bearing his soul for us, and it's fascinating. I did feel for Fiona Harvey in the aftermath of it all. Like, it
Yeah.
was stupid. It was irresponsible how open Netflix left themselves here. And obviously, even if the nuts and bolts of the story were true, nobody wants that portrayal of themselves out there. So I understand her point of view, and I hope she gets something from her legal action. I genuinely do. But at the same time, away from how irresponsible that decision was, I thought God as kind of a writer and victim here, as well as kind of the incredible portrayal of Martha by Jessica Gunning, I thought it was actually really empathetic. I thought it was actually quite fair. And that's what made it so compelling. Like, they weren't trying to paint her as the typical evil stalker. They were portraying her
Mm,
as someone who had issues. And actually, Gad was as much at fault for what happened because he, at times, when he thought he was safe, would just go, I'm just going to pour petrol on this fire again, you know? And like,
yeah. That's what I
and
loved about it. Like he was so honest with some of the dumb shit he did, I think, as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you're kind of like, you as an audience, as a viewer, you implicitly understand she's going to do what she's going to do.
Yeah.
You don't need to feed into this. And then, are you a victim and stuff like that? And you have those discussions, because there were sometimes where it was like at the start where I'm like, is he a victim? And then I'm like, oh yeah, no, he very much is. On top of this, and away from the headlines, what I loved as well was, and where I think the show really succeeds, is shining a spotlight on things that men don't talk about. So much things that you'll
Mm,
never hear. Like, he's very much, he literally works in the pub, so he's literally a lad down the pub uh at this point of his life when we meet him, and the topics he addresses here are things that you'd never ever discuss with the lads down the pub, but they're very real, they exist, and I hope people felt seen with. Like, you have the kind of stuff like female on male stalking, or just kind of, if a lad receives any kind of abuse from a woman, the way the world just kind of is like
yeah.
because we don't know how to deal with that because we're not used to it. Um, Men were kind of
That
fluid.
scene on at the canal like was very disturbing to me
Yes,
when she groped him.
yes,
Like that was nearly more disturbing the way it was done than the other scene up in Scotland
yeah,
to me.
big time.
Yeah, that really just like stood out and kind of just made me feel awful inside.
Yeah,
Um, for the portrayal of that as well. It was incredibly well done. But yeah, it just like you're saying, like it just really highlights that like that can happen to guys too.
yeah,
Yeah,
big time.
100%.
And again, like, how the world just doesn't know how to deal with that. Like, even just
Mm-mm.
like men with fluid sexuality. When's the last time you saw someone whose sexuality was, I don't know, like, on telly? Like, you know what I mean? Because even now we have to define and we have to say something about this and we have to do that. Whereas, like, God is just very much like, I don't know, I am what I am. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
that's really interesting. That's really refreshing to see. The challenges trans people dating have to deal with. You know what I mean? I like the way that the trans person in this was actually quite self-assured, but not in a performative or kind of woke way. It was just kind of like she just was who she was and she was comfortable in her
yeah,
skin. But even then, the challenges that she has to deal with without making her a victim at any stage, men discussing being sexually abused, even just the simple act, and this was probably my favorite part of the series, of just burying yourself in front of your parents and being like, this is who I am, in a situation where you don't come from that home that speaks about things. I'm like, fuck. And there's one scene in it that just made me bawl in a show that I didn't think had that in it. Where he was having a discussion with his parents. If you know, you know. If you don't,
Yeah.
you probably have the same experience. I think this gets forgotten about because of the scandal of it all, but fuck me, when you take a step back, this was a great show.
Yeah,
And you'd
100%
like
agreed.
to add yourself?
Um, no, just that show did its job, I think, that in the fact that like I couldn't watch more than one episode at a time and
Mm,
making me feel things, feel emotion, feel like it really just got to me. And I think that's the mark of a really good TV show in a way too. But like you said, I just agree with nearly everything you said there as well, of just Richard Gadd just completely bearing his soul and like just warts and all basically with it of yeah, this is like some of the silly or dumb shit that I did. I also loved as well that he really showed when he was performing comedy live and his particular brand of comedy, capturing that cringe awkwardness of it just not working
mm,
as well was just like so beautifully done, I think, as well. Like that
yeah.
empty pub he does up in Scotland for the Edinburgh Fringe as well, and it's just it's horrific. And like just yeah, his brand of comedy that I feel like probably came a little bit after maybe the Mighty Boosh and just
Mm,
wasn't really a thing anymore, maybe. But yeah, I just thought that was done really, really well too. But yeah, you're
yeah.
right. Uh it's just one of those shows that like you don't know you wanted it till you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then holy shit, we got it. You're number six.
My number six is House of the Dragon.
Okay, it's not on my list. Go for it though. I,
Yes.
I I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was 13 on my list, so it just finished outside. But I had a feeling we'd be discussing it anyway. So
Yeah. Look, I'm just such a massive Game of Thrones fan. It was always going to be on my list, I think, no matter what. Um, this season especially, with some of the battles that we got, some of the CGI in it, it felt like we were getting cinema level movie on TV every week sometimes, with some of the battles. Um, I loved. I love the dialogue in it. Like I know a lot of people complains that like not a lot happened in the show from week to week. It was like too much kind of building to stuff, but I that's what makes Game of Thrones for me sometimes as well is just the scheming, the little B plots, C plots, D plots of people as well, and how it's all gonna fall into place. And I know we've been burned with that a lot before, no pun intended, because it's dragons and stuff, but um it just really, really worked for me. I loved the fact that we got King Aegon for me being quite a sympathetic character for this season as well, even though in season one he's not exactly that at all. Especially with certain acts he or one particular act he did in season one. That's not even in the books. So I was like, why the fuck does he throw this in here? Because like he'd be a kind of a flawless tragic character in this season. But yeah, just all of the characters, and the more I'm thinking about it and talking about it, the more I'd want to maybe go back and rewatch season two. But again, it's just absolutely brilliant. Um, the stuff in Harrenhal I know dragged on a little bit, but apart from that though, um, I thought it was a pretty stellar season to be honest.
yeah, I just agree with everything you say. I love this show, and it's 13 on my list, and the only reason it's 13 is because there was just 12 shows I liked more.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed chatting about it every week with you guys. Um, I thought it got back to what we liked about Game of Thrones.
Yes.
The only thing it missed was just that kind of just episode 9. The big battle episode. It's the
Yeah.
only thing that it missed. Like, and I don't think that's even the writer's fault. I think it got cut down from a planned 10 episode season to an 8 episode season. They're just like, well, we've written 80 episodes, so this is what you're getting.
Yeah.
And I think that like and I stand over and I fought with Jerry and Dan about this, and I'm like, you like this episode? This is a really good episode of television. The reason you don't like it is because you don't get to see the next episode for 2 years. But if you got to see the new episode next week, you really fucking like this episode, because everything you're saying to me is you like this, but you want it more.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily like, and that's the only thing that marked it down with others, because I just feel like the rest were more complete seasons that just fulfilled their promise.
Yeah.
But I loved all the elements of this season. I loved the fact that Game of Thrones is back in our lives. I loved the fact that we're having a slower paced show as well, like rather than the time jumps that are trying to get you so much in a 10 episode season spanning like 30 years. We're back to the week and the day-to-day decisions and the discussions in rooms and the machinations that go into the big moments that hit. Like if you think of the battle that we got here as well, like when you think of stuff like the dragon scenes we got as well, like absolutely
Ridiculous,
iconic
yeah.
stuff up there with anything in Game of Thrones history. So no, big fan of this show. I thought they did well. If there was an episode 9, we'd be talking about it, I'd say, in like, our top 3.
It felt like the most big event show, I think, of all of the shows I've seen this year as well.
Yeah.
In terms of what people were actually talking about as a big kind of, because it was a week-to-week show, which I do like. And like you go into work the next day and people would be talking about it and giving all the theories and stuff about it. And I love that. And especially in the Game of Thrones universe as well. It's just great to discuss that for like 8 weeks with people. And even with you guys then as well on the podcast too. It was great. And I just love being in that world. I love the characters. And I cannot wait for 2 years.
Yeah. And no, we don't have to, because we've got Night of the Seven Kingdoms this year. So
yes,
we have multiple spin-offs now. So again, like there's that whole, they're kind of doing what the boys did with Gen V, and it worked really well for the boys in Gen V. So I'm going to believe this. And again, that's something I'm going to read as well, because the novellas that's based on, the Duncan Egg novellas, are supposed to be
I've read them.
So
they're great.
I'm going to read it. Yeah. So I'm going to change tack because I'm now kind of raging. I haven't read ahead, and I'm stuck in my not knowing what's going to happen in House of the Dragon, but also being at risk of being spoiled at any time for the next 4 or 5 years of my life. So yeah,
that has also been a tough one as well, actually, for House of the Dragon. Yeah, I did the exact same thing as you. I've like read up to where the show is, and I'm not reading any further than that. I don't want to know.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
It's hard.
In my number 5 is Ripley. Do you see
Ripley?
this?
I've not seen Ripley. No.
Okay.
I've seen Andrew Scott's been nominated for Golden Globe this year though for it,
and
or for next year.
He should be. That's exactly the point I was going to start with, because between this and All of Us Strangers, 2024 felt like vindication for all of us who kind of known that Andrew Scott is one of the best actors on the planet, and it feels like the planet realized that, and he finally got the projects that let him kind of showcase that. For anyone who doesn't know this, it's a retelling. It's on Netflix. It's a retelling of the Mr. Ripley story, told this time by Stephen Zalian, who wrote the screenplay for the likes of Schindler's List, The Irishman, and the very underrated HBO series The Night Of. It's on Netflix and it's in black and white, which will probably make people start to think of, get certain connotations about what kind of show that it is, because that sometimes when they've tried stuff like that can be a bit wanky, if we're being honest. But it isn't here. It really fucking works. And instead it just feels like you're watching a serialized TV show, but actually it's a really long old movie of a classic story told really fucking well. For those who don't know the story itself, or if you haven't seen the Matt Damon movie, Ripley is a bit of a con artist. When we meet him, he's asked to track down the son of a millionaire who believes he's a good friend of his son. He believes Ripley is a good friend of his son, and then he tries to make the situation work for him. But it very quickly starts to spiral out of control, and then it's a really tense thriller where you're left wondering if Ripley is going to get caught or not. It made for a decent movie adaptation, but the story works fantastically as a TV show because it lets everything just breathe a bit more. And you have to sit in the tension of every police interview or every encounter with a potential witness or someone, if they're about to find out, are they about to walk in the wrong time, what's going to happen. And it's just, I think, 8 episodes of that. It doesn't have the action or kind of headline stuff of a Breaking Bad, but it is actually very similar in terms of the constant tension that it leaves
Mm.
you with of, is he going to get caught, and what the fuck's he going to do if he gets caught? Like, is he going to have to kill a person if they catch out, or they find out too much, or what's going to happen, and how's that going to go? Like, a bad situation just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and just spiraling out of control. And like, again, it's just Andrew Scott, like, Ripley is just a kind of perpetual liar. So what happens if, like, you pull on the wrong thread and all the lies come out? Is he going to be able to lie his way out of that? Is he going to be able to improvise, or is he going to be able to get it? And the great thing about Andrew Scott is he plays it with a kind of Walter White charm, where you're like, do I actually want him to get away with it, or do I want him to get caught? Like, what do I
Mm.
want to see more here? Like, what's more interesting? And what I loved most about this, and it's not going to sound like the most amazing thing probably, but it's just the simple storytelling techniques that Zalian uses to let you sit and bathe in this tension, like the sound design or the use of repetition. Like, a character will walk into a room and there's no music or other sound, you just hear every footstep going across the floor, like an old movie, okay?
Yeah,
And
like a
then there's,
noir kind of
yeah,
detective
it's
movie. Yeah.
very noir. It's very, very, exactly. You got it. And then there's like a knock on the door, and you're like, who the fuck is at the door? Who the fuck's at the door? And then you have to hear the footsteps walking back across, and you're like, who's at the door? What's going to happen? Oh my God, is that going to be that thing? What the fuck? What the fuck? You know what I mean? And it mightn't sound spectacular or amazing, but it really fucking works because the show's so confidently told, and they're happy. They have the time and the space to let it breathe and just let you sit in it all and really tease out the story in a way a movie just can't. It is a real hidden gem that didn't get the buzz it deserves. And if you missed it, make it something you binge over Christmas. It's probably a good one actually that you could probably binge if you want to watch something with the family that's just really good. That's like, there's
Mm.
not anything I think massively inappropriate in it. I don't think there's any sex scenes or anything like that. And it's just a really fucking good show. You can get stuck into, like, and properly addicted and binge. Um, that's my number five. Kev, your number five.
Okay. It was my number one last year. It's The Bear.
Oh, okay. Number five, I think, is still, you're doing all right.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
The Bear is okay being a number five.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just this season I loved. I did absolutely adore it. I loved the comedy, especially in this. I found this a very, very entertaining season, but I also found it took away a little bit from what I really love about The Bear, of some of the tension and drama, I think, as well. I also thought this season, like what you were saying with a show earlier, I think this was meant to be, this was two, sorry, this was a full season that was chopped up. And I think next season is going to be a conclusion to this season more than anything else. And it felt like that a little bit as well at times, where there was a bit of padding in it. But at the same time, I know the opening episode was definitely a strong choice of basically like an entire montage. Um,
Yeah.
But as it went on, like even just the idea of getting haunted, I think is still really, really funny to say, to be honest.
Yes. Yes. I haven't done that to enough people.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I need to start doing. All right, I'm in work. I'm in the office tomorrow. I'm gonna start haunting people. Imagine, I'm people's boss. You're gonna see me getting sacked for haunting my team, but I will go down swinging.
Yeah,
I will
like
proudly
a true
take that.
flag.
I was like, in the investigation meeting, it's like, you were haunting them. Yes, I was. I regret nothing.
Are you gonna stop? No. They haven't apologized to me.
You have to stop me, or they apologize. It's that simple. Like,
Yeah. And just like a couple of the cameos this season were great. I did think the last episode there's cameos. This isn't a crazy spoiler. There's cameos from chefs that
mm,
I thought was a little bit too up its own hole.
yeah.
But overall, it's look, anytime I get to spend with these characters is just brilliant. I love Richie. I think his character development from season one to now is probably my favorite, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely love it. But yeah, anytime I just get and there's the episode with, what is her name? My mind's gone blank now. The other week got an episode dedicated entirely to
Yeah, the birth episode. Or no,
Oh, there was the
the
birth episode was
that
phenomenal
was
too.
brilliant. And no, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah, I can't remember her name. I
Yeah,
forget all their because I watch it so quickly when it comes out that I then forget their names until I watch it again, and then they're my favorite people ever.
I
But
know.
it just takes so yeah.
But birth episode and that episode in particular
The
of
flashback.
Flashback, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Both incredible episodes and
Yes.
absolute standouts of the season.
Yeah.
And that's
And
why,
standouts within the series as well. Like they're
yeah,
up there with
100%.
any of the other episodes, I think.
Yeah.
Like again, that was the bear at its peak. And it did hit some highs.
And I do, and I think some of the episodes maybe around these two standouts, that's where you kind of got a bit of filler in there. And I'm just really, really, really looking forward to the next season of it, though. I'm glad I got to spend some more time with these characters this year. And even though it wasn't its strongest season, I still love the show so much that it's still high up on my list that I get
Okay. I'll get
to hang out with these guys again.
I get it. I'm the same an awful lot of the time. Like I was one of the last people off the ship for Game of Thrones season 8. Like because I'm like I love the show so much. I'm not gonna be mad because I'm just happy I get to watch this show.
Yeah.
Um and so I get it.
I also think
And
season 3 will be better with season 4
yeah,
out.
yeah, I do agree with that. There was a lot of people I know actually listened to the podcast we did just covering the bear, and everyone who did came back to me and they were like, "Yeah, you got it. It was 2 seasons split.
Yeah.
It was one season split in two, and then it was just padded out." But what I why I it's not in my because I agree with everything you say. I love the 2 episodes you reference in particular, but it's just not it's not a complete season telly. So
Yeah.
like I can't turn around and say when there's 10 series that I did love that a season that isn't a complete season that I don't consider a complete season of telly is one of my top 10. Um and like some of the padding was really egregious. Some of it was wanky. I feel if the season had been better, episode 1, we're saying it's a genius episode, whereas the season felt padded. So episode 1 comes across as padding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just didn't have the full thing. And then there was like, it was just the bear always was so good at its peak because it always felt so effortless. They did that episode in season 1 where it's just all one shot. It's literally just a one shot scene for 27 minutes. And it's phenomenal, but you don't realize until about 22 minutes that it's all been one shot this
Yeah.
entire time because it's just such effortlessly told and you're so wrapped up in the character. But this time it was very much this is the one where they all slag each other. And this is the one where they go to a flashback. And this is the one where dramatic stuff happens. You know what I mean? And it felt just telegraphed in a way that the bear is better than this. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And that's, I think, the disappointment that I speak to rather than not enjoying the show itself, because I did enjoy spending time with these characters and felt very much the same as yourself. But that's why it's at 25 for me. Again, around shows that I really enjoyed as well, and I really enjoyed this. So I'm not saying it was bad, but yeah, just didn't make my top 10. Number 4, I'm 99% sure it's going to be higher up in your list. My number 4 is X-Men 97.
That's hard.
Yeah, I had a feeling. So we'll flip to you. You're number 4.
My number 4 is Scavenger's Reign. Now, I do want to put an
Okay.
asterisk on this because I know this show was technically 2023, but it only came on Netflix 2024.
That
Um,
counts.
but yeah, this show I've watched it again. Now after I've seen it, it's still one of the most beautifully animated shows I've ever seen. Um, it's really, really compelling, great sci-fi. That's not really done anymore. And really getting into the science fiction of things and how an ecosystem can kind of interact with technology as well on a planet. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Um, I've already spoken about this quite a lot in detail, but like this show for me, um, I really hope it gets a season 2. It deserves it, but at the same time, where they leave it, it's fine to be a season a one and done as well. They do leave it a little open for a season 2. But that's just a selfish part of me just wanting more of this. Um, it's more storytelling through animation more so even than the plot for me was just phenomenal. I can't. It's one of those shows that I just want people to watch.
Yeah. If you say anything, you'll spoil it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get
It's one of
that.
those ones just do yourself if you are even any way into animation or sci-fi, do yourself a favor and watch this. It's bleak at times, but it's so fucking compelling and amazing.
Guys, Kev wants to talk about this with people. Like,
Yeah.
he
Like
wants to
no,
talk this through.
I've one friend
Help
that's
him
seen
out.
it. That's it.
Help him out. I'll try add that to my Christmas list as well. It is expanding as including in this conversation, but I'll try add that to my Christmas list
Mm.
as well and give you something to talk about. Another one very similar in that it is a limited series, and if it ended as a limited series, it could have like it'd be perfect, but like it is actually getting a second season. That's been confirmed. My number three, I don't know if we've spoken about this before. I have a feeling we've touched on it and you hadn't seen it. My number three is Shogun.
No, I've seen the first two episodes. I've actually just started watching it.
Ah, you're so lucky. You're so
Yeah,
lucky.
and it's very strong so far.
Yes. This was actually my number one for most of the year. And when I finished it, I'm like, that's number one. It's not going to be topped. It's not going to be topped. And it's fallen to number three
Wow.
as of late. Yeah. Because the top two just came along and swept it into third. And it was with a heavy fucking heart that I moved it. But I loved this show. It was fantastic. We've spoken about shows trying to be the new Game of Thrones, and then a show that wasn't trying to be the new Game of Thrones came along. It's like, oh, it's the new Game of Thrones. Because it's got that War of the Five Kings vibe to it. It's about
Yeah.
basically, it's a modern FX take on a classic, ever so slightly racist 1975. Good intention racist, different time racist. You know what I mean? In kind of white savior type racist
Okay. Yeah.
1975 novel. Not intentionally or bad spirited by any means. That then spawned an iconic 1980s TV show about a British man who finds himself central to a civil war type scenario in 16th century Japan. It's just fantastic. It's got all the Game of Thrones kind of notes, vibes, but if you like Japanese stories, particularly about kind of the samurai era and that kind of thing, it's Game of Thrones in that, you know, and it's got a historical context as well, but it doesn't get bogged down in that at any stage. Whether you know everything about this world or you know nothing about this world, you'll follow it along just as fine, and it'll be just as exciting because the center of it are absolute powerhouse performances by the three leads and Cosmo Jarvis, bringing some much needed levity. You've got Hiroyuki Sanada, who's playing Ned Stark meets Tywin Lannister as Toranaga, who's kind of the central kind of not necessarily the central character. I'd say Cosmo Jarvis probably is the audience
Mm.
avatar. Well, definitely the audience avatar kind of introducing us to this world. But Toranaga is like the main kind of political protagonist that we're following.
Yeah.
And then you've got the breakout star of this, who's Anna Sawai as Mariko, who is I definitely haven't said that. I've done the Blanchardstown remix of that traditional Japanese name. Mariko! Yeah, dinner's ready. so sorry, Japan. The walls of Mariko, what? No, but Anna Sawai is absolutely phenomenal in this and steals the show. And it's interesting now because you're probably 2 episodes in going, does she? Okay, that's interesting because her character expands as time goes on and she becomes quite central to it. And just like, actually, it's like she's the awards winner there. Like, for me, anyway. It kind of packed a punch and got the benefit of originally being a limited series. Like, this tells a 1,500-page novel story in 9 episodes, so they can go in. You know that great thing about original series or limited series where it's like it doesn't have to save anything for the future. It doesn't have to worry about, is this going to be in a movie? Is this going to be a spin-off? No, we have to hold off that character. We have to do this. We have to save something for season 2, and we have to do a twist here or like a to be continued here or anything like that. they can just go for it. And I had the license to go all in on the source materials twists because there's only 9 episodes. There's a lot they had to cut out. So everything is killer in here. Everything matters, but it doesn't like short you on character stuff, like on little moments and character interactions and the things that make a good show great. And it doesn't have to kind of either use creative license for the sake of padding things out as well. Like I said, it's all killer here. And the problem is, and it's not a problem with the series because the series is a near perfect series of television. But the problem is the show was so good they ended up accidentally, not intentionally, getting a season 2 of this, which is hard to imagine as they've told the story now. But that's a discussion for season 2, and it's going to be an interesting one because they've fallen upon this incredible ensemble cast, this world that just captured our imagination. But imagine Game of Thrones just ended after season 1, and you're like, what? I'm so I'm so into all of this now. What are you doing to me? And that's kind of what they did, which is Watchmen, I remember, is the only kind of comparison they have where I'm like, you've got me all the way in on this story. How can you end it now? Um, and this is something which has got green lit for season 2, but I don't know if it'll be the better for it because they have to now write original content and
There's no other novel
stories.
or anything like that they can base it on, or it's
Nothing.
just the
Stories
one.
being told.
Okay.
And they have some of the cast back who survived the season. And I'm like, but their stories, like the story is told, it's finished. One thing I'll signal, and don't worry, I'm not going to give any details away, okay? But I want people to be ready for it, okay? The ending, the last episode, it's more low key than you're ready for. So I'd rather people knew that going in, okay? So prepare
Okay.
yourself for that if you decide to binge it this Christmas. But personally, I fucking loved. I think you'll like it too because you're like me. You're like I could like watch people talk in rooms all day in Game of Thrones, and you like
Yeah.
that kind of build up and character led storytelling and so on. But you definitely go into it being like this is the battle episode, and instead it's quite low key, and they kind of make some different bold decisions. I loved it. I really thought that it nailed it because I feel like if they had gone and done a Battle of the Bastards style episode, it could have just been the end of a Marvel movie where like you did so well, and then there was a 45-minute battle, and I just started checking my phone. You know what I mean? Like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, the good guys won. Grant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could have gone that way, but it actually, the more it sits with you, the more you're like, that's the best way to do it because that was actually the story they were telling all along. It wasn't about necessarily big fuck off set pieces. Don't worry, you still have big fuck off set pieces to come, and they come in the most unexpected places. Like you're like I was not ready for that. I was there was nothing that indicated that that would happen then. there, nothing told me. It's like imagine a red wedding except as people having breakfast, and you're like, how is this a red wedding when I didn't know we were at a wedding? It is like it, and it's very good for that. The twists are hard and they hit hard, and they're not afraid. They don't pull any punches with this. Shogun is excellent. I loved it. I'm very jealous of you getting to watch it fresh. Keep me posted on how you're getting on. Same with anyone who
Will
binges
do.
over the Christmas. That's my number 3, Kev. Your number 3.
My
Is
number
a
three
sound.
might be a surprising one.
Okay.
My number 3 is from all the way back in January.
All right. What were we watching in January?
My number 3 is True Detective Night Country.
That is a surprising one. Okay. Okay. Well, no, the more I think about it, yeah, that fits. Yeah, okay. Okay.
I loved this. I loved it for the time of year it came out. It just suited the vibe. It is probably the closest to horror I think I have on my list. Um, I think the cast like Jodie Foster is like what an absolute comeback for her. She's
She was
fucking
great.
phenomenal in this. Callie, is it Race? I think is the other detective in it as well. Absolutely incredible too. And Fiona Shaw as well was absolutely brilliant too. But I wasn't mad on True Detective season 2. Season 3 was fine. Um, this because it looked a little bit different and it looked a bit more kind of like of the occult in the ads. I was like, okay, I'm kind of interested in this, and it blew me away from the opening scene alone and the horror that happened in that scene. Um, it just absolutely hooked me, and I just loved the setting. I loved the fact that it was just always nighttime. Um, it was terrifying like in parts as well. Um, and it just hooked me every single week. It was the mystery that it set out. At the beginning of it, you were just how are they going to tell this, or how are they going to resolve this? Because it's either going to be completely supernatural or it's going to be fucking a complete shitty cop out. And I think the ending that we got on this, I know it was I think it was divided with people, but I loved the ending of this. I thought it was
Okay.
really smart and how it really, really well done. Um, and it's only 6 episodes as well. If you haven't seen it, you can easily binge this one as well. Um, but yeah, I loved just the setting. I think I'm probably really romanticizing it because of the time of year it was, when it's just dark and shitty out and it's January.
Mm.
And having a show like this to watch week to week, for someone like me and you that like just love good TV, um, this held a special place, I think, on my list. And I think it really just stuck the landing, and it was great.
Okay, I see how this matches. I'd match up this well with you. It doesn't surprise me when I think about it that this is your number three. I don't have it anywhere near my top 10, if I'm being honest.
Mm,
I did enjoy it, and part of it was I enjoyed it because of the time of year. It was
yeah.
like the perfect January show because it felt like a January where it's like kind of slow, kind of, and it was just something interesting to happen. I think the only other TV show, I think that was the one time this year we didn't have 50 TV shows that we were trying to watch, and the only other show that I can remember watching at this time was Echo, and that just like was
Didn't even
nowhere
watch it.
near. Yeah, not as bad as kind of the rep it gets, but um yeah, I thought it was fine. I really liked Jodie Foster in it. I liked the horror. I liked it embracing its horror elements. I liked the
Mm,
callbacks to previous episodes and how they
yes,
started
yes,
to make
yes,
this into
yes.
a world. Um, but then I also felt like the fact that it was True Detective and had to tick certain True Detective boxes almost hindered it in certain ways. And they felt compelled to be that. I felt like if it was just a show that was called Night Country, I would have liked it more because they wouldn't have felt the need to be so detective-y and mystery and have to do certain things and
Hmm.
have characters monologue in certain ways. And I felt it would have benefited from being a standalone identity and just making up its own rules. Because what they got right, they got really right. The setting, the vibe, the theme song, Billie Eilish, like just
Unreal,
stuck
yeah.
with me. It was brilliant. It was perfect. And I didn't mind the ending either. I was one of the people who didn't hate it. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'd rather that than it just, I'm the Wizard of Oz. You know what I mean? I'd rather that than just something really reachy.
Would you
So
have
yeah, no,
preferred if it was just Night Country and we got a very different ending?
yeah, but I could live with that because then it's not True Detective.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
had to
It
be
would it
that
would have
because
to be its own thing. Yeah, yeah.
it had to
I get that.
be what it was because it's True Detective, and that's why I mean it's hamstrung by the format and kind of has to
Yeah.
fit into this world and stuff like that. And again, it actually doesn't. Nobody is begging for more True Detective. I don't think many people out there. It's not. It's not the strong. It's not Black Mirror. It's not any of these shows that like has its own really hard identity. It's had essentially for me, it's had one amazing season in season one, and then it's had three grand seasons and one awful season. So I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't have to be True Detective. You can just be Night Country and get HBO books and still do the exact same thing, but have your own identity.
I wonder,
So
was it a HBO thing of like, we'll do this, but you got to put True Detective on it.
I think HBO just really overvalue. I think they felt the need to have a property that was known and
Gotcha. Okay.
established
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
time of the year when they didn't have Sunday night programming. You know what I mean? They didn't have that prime time. And I think that to be fair, the creator of it is quite a big True Detective fan. I listen to interviews and stuff like that. So they're well up for
Mm,
making this a True Detective show. I'm not saying that they were it was forced upon them or anything like that. I just feel it would have benefited from having its own identity. To not have to be a True Detective show because who cares? Like
yeah.
True Detective isn't the strongest brand. It's not Game of Thrones. It's not anything like any of the big strong HBO brands. Um, I think we've got the same number two.
I don't.
Okay. Okay. Well, then that means that something that I was sure was on your list is not on your list. Oh, wait,
Okay.
or you know. Oh, okay. I get it. Tell me your number two. We'll flip to you and we'll go again. It's because I know it.
X-Men
Yeah, it's
97 is
X-Men
my number two.
97. Okay, so I know what your
100%.
number one is then. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
What is my number two is your number one. Okay. Let's talk X-Men 97 then. Go for
Yeah.
it.
This is once again a show that I saw got announced last year. I was like, oh yeah, I used to watch that when I was a kid. I'll probably give it a go, but maybe
I think
not.
we
And then
told you about it live on air, and you're like, oh, cool.
yeah.
I think you
um
learned about it on this podcast, and you're like, yeah, what's that?
yeah, because I know I do remember it being announced, and then you were like, "Oh, it's out next week." I was like, "Oh yeah, fuck it, I'll give that a go."
Yeah. I remember that.
Um, and then from the first episode that just brought back every single childhood fucking feel from watching it. Um, and just how well it was done as
Yeah.
well. This was a show made for people that grew up with the show that are in their 30s now. Like they knew exactly the audience they were catering to. It's not I don't want to be that dick and be like, it's not a kid show, but like it was very mature in a lot of the themes that I went with
Not a
this
kid show.
this season.
It
Yeah.
is a kid show for kids who were kids in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now it's for those same kids who are now adults. And the
Yeah.
tone has shifted to match.
And like every one of our characters as well, they just instantly feel familiar. Like as soon as they're on screen again, you just instantly feel um just like yeah, you're a kid again watching a Saturday morning cartoons. The entire Magneto storyline in this from the get-go was phenomenal from episode one to Genosha, which is one of the most heartbreaking episodes I think of a cartoon I think we've ever seen. Um, to this absolutely incredible three-part finale that could have been its own movie, like a mini movie. Um, and having to wait to watch that week to week was one of the biggest killers in this. But yeah, this show um for an animated kids show, I say that in quotation marks, absolutely just killed out of the water for me in terms of storytelling, in terms of emotion, in terms of um just having characters that you really, really care about and just really, really interesting storytelling as well. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about it, man. It's just one of the best things Marvel's ever done.
Yes, it's fantastic. I love this, and this was my number two for the longest time.
Yeah.
Throughout this year before it was just usurped late on in the year. And just wow to all of this. Another just again, expectations versus reality is kind of the theme of our list this year. I was psyched for this, and I rewatched all of the original X-Men animated series before this aired, and I had a wish list for what I wanted out of this. That was like, it's not achievable. They're not going to do that. It needed to give a really satisfying reason to reboot the whole series. Um, it needed to give me enough of every character that I cared about in the limited episode time that I had. It needed to offer something new, but also keep the silliness and the insanity of the original. And they nailed every single objective and then some. And what has me so excited for not only for season two, but also the upcoming Spider-Man animated reboot is that it seems like they were given loads of space and freedom to work without having to ever fit into the Marvel machine. You
Yeah.
know, they were just allowed to tell their own story. I had a real for fans, by fans feel in the best way. Like it was kind of conceived by people who were both obsessed with X-Men like us as kids and like would draw cartoons in their copybook in school. But who also had the genuine creative chops to make that matter. And I think at this point, now in a way that we did do an episode on this earlier in the year, but we couldn't really discuss the scandal around head writer and original showrunner of this, Bo DeMeo, at the time, because we didn't know he was fired coming into this series, and we didn't know why. The accusations are, now we've learned a bit more, that he was a bit of a workplace creep. And look, even just a cursory glance at any of his socials at any stage with that in mind, and the weak defense he came out with, kind of tells me, I don't know the truth or the veracity of the matter. I wasn't there, but it tells me about what I believe, and it's probably for the best that he's gone from this project. But also, awkwardly, he did a really good job on the show. He
Yeah.
did. Like, it's a really good show. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, it is what it is. Like, Harvey Weinstein was the exec producer on my favorite movie of all time. It's just like,
Yeah.
it is what it is. Um, for my money, won't get into obvious details. My top shows that I have above this all have shocking deaths in this in them. This was
Okay.
the most shocking death on
Yeah.
TV.
Oh,
Uh,
100%. Yeah, same with me.
like, and it just, because I was just like, I didn't think this show would do that
Yeah.
in that way.
Because
Like,
it lulls you into thinking this is a kid show.
yeah,
And then it just breaks you.
yes, it's the right project, made by the right people at exactly the right time. And we're at a time where our belief in the MCU is kind of stuttering now, and that's fine, whatever. For me, everything we're getting from the MCU just kind of feels like supplementary content after
Mm,
Endgame. And I'm okay with that. I'll take the good, I'll enjoy it for what it's worth. If it's bad, I'll discuss it, but I'm not emotionally devastated if it's not up there with like phase three. Um, but this tells me that I can look forward to more X-Men content,
yeah.
and that they're going to use them reliably, however they get used within the Marvel machine, because they're not afraid to hand the reins over to people who get it. Um, and the only reason it's not in the top three is because there were just a couple of episodes where they were kind of meh, but I didn't hate them because as I said above, I wanted the silly episodes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, they gave me what I wanted, but like, it also meant that there was a bit of filler and padding in there. Um, but the highs were as high as any other TV show on the list this year. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And that ending as well is just such a what a way to finish it to leave you wanting more
Yeah,
as well.
incredible. And we're getting it.
And if you haven't watched it, just fucking go watch it. It's so good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. If you watch the animated series and you haven't watched this, what are you even doing? I don't think
Yeah.
anyone listening who love the animated series hasn't watched this. They nailed it. The word is out there. Um, I think we sussed what your number one is. I don't know if
Yes.
there's intrigue to it, and I think it's. Am I right in saying it's something we've discussed?
It's absolutely something we've discussed.
Yes. Okay, so let's get to it. Let's do your number one first. Because I think mine's a bit more left field. So go for it. Tell us what it is.
Well, number one is Penguin
Yeah. This was my number one for a while.
for like 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, we're gonna stick with the theme of this and be like, well, this was not a show I was expecting to be great.
Yeah.
Um, the Batman in particular was a film that I liked, I didn't love. And when Penguin got announced, I kind of thought, okay, well, look, I'll give it a go. The same as X-Men 97 as well. I'll watch it, but I'm not crazy excited for it. And then
Holy shit.
the first fucking episode just blew everything out of the water.
What have you done?
Um, yeah, and it just kept on going. Like if you want to really see us discuss this in at length, go back to one of the previous
There's a whole
episodes. But
podcast
like
of it. Yeah,
every one of these characters, I loved. I thought just Sophia Gigante now was one of the better performances in there, or one of the best performances in this. The Arkham episode was just incredible. The complex relationship he has with his mother, his flashbacks episode, everything about this show was just perfection every week. And it was like it was a show that even though there was a few on my list there that I watched week to week and I looked forward to, nothing compared to how much I was like just gunning for the next Penguin episode. I couldn't wait for the next one. And look, Colin Farrell, he is once again he's up for a Golden Globe now as well. And he absolutely deserves it as well for his performance in this. He's just unbelievable in this. He's so good. Um, and it just sets up so much afterwards as well. We don't need a season two. Um, but this was a series that I think with superhero shows don't really get right, but this was like the perfect TV show to be and a kind of accompaniment to a film.
Mm,
And just be like you probably wouldn't even need to see this, I'd say, watching Batman 2, but it helps.
mm.
It's one of those things where it's a rise to power kind of thing for Penguin, and yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah. The phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats" comes to mind when it comes to this project, because that's what it's done, not only for the Batman series from Matt Reeves, but for DC as a whole.
Yeah,
Like, wild, wild. Like, again, I felt very similar to yourself when I saw the Batman first. And then I rewatched it coming into this. And I'm like, oh, I kind of feel like I'm more dialed into the tone now and I get it a bit more. And now I like it. And now, having watched this, I bet I'm going to watch it again before the Batman 2 comes out. And I'll be like, I fucking love this movie. Because similar to what Rings of Power did for me with Lord of the Rings, it just makes everything better because it just
yep.
is now attached to the credibility and quality of this. DC has been struggling for decades now at this stage to try replicate what Marvel is doing. And then they're like, right, James Gunn is our guy. We'll put all our chips on James Gunn. And then, sod's fucking law, as that happens, this little Batman project that Matt Reeves is working on is just like, I've actually figured it all out.
Don't actually need you.
Like, sorry. And James Gunn, to the point, like, now do you see it's very funny online. The only bad thing is James Gunn posts on threads, which no one else does, so you have to be there to read it. But he's getting into back and forth with fans, because fans like have just got it into their head that he hates this project and that he wants to kill it, but they love it so much. And he's like, every day, it feels like every time I see a new post from James Gunn, it's like, I fucking told you I like this project. We're not going to interfere with it. But he knows, not, don't fuck around with this. Let Matt
Yeah.
Reeves cook. They've got it.
And just
And
leave it do its own thing. Have your own Batman there and
yeah,
just leave it do its own thing. Yeah,
do whatever you want, James
yeah.
Gunn, but don't fuck with this.
Yeah.
And like, we don't need to rehash all the points we made. There's a whole show out there. It's very recently. It's on the feed. So just go listen back if you want to hear us get in detail, and we get spoilery as well. But Matt Reeves' HBO-ifying Gotham has given me one of my favorites of Batman I've ever experienced. We spoke about it in the show where we recapped it. It's got elements of The Soprano, it's got elements of Wire, but at the same time, it's also so Batman. It is totally
Yeah.
Batman at the same time, and how he pulled that off and merged all of those. And like I said, it just makes the Batman make more sense, because now I'm dialed into this tone. I know what you're got. I know what the big picture is now. You know what I mean? You know, when you watch like the first season of a show and you're like, yeah, I like it. And then the second season is actually class. And you're like, oh, I actually like the first season more because I get where you're going for now. I understand
Mm.
the bigger picture. That's what this does for the Batman. Did you ever see the video of how they cast? It's a piss take video, but it's like how they cast the Penguin, and it's like, get me the Irish guy, and then like they mean Brendan Gleeson, but they accidentally hire Colin Farrell, and it's like, so for the Penguin, you got
So
me
like the
this
Banshees of Inisherin, they get them
beautiful
mixed up.
young actor who we're gonna have to dress up when we have a guy who's Irish, who's friends with him, who looks like the Penguin. it's, it's actually like, yeah, that happened. And it wasn't that Farrell was miscast. He nailed it. But like, it took
Yeah.
such work, to the point that I then sent you another video a few weeks back where he's in the outfit, but he's speaking in his normal accent.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
broke our fucking brains. Like, it is great. But that's how good he is, because he just became the Penguin, like, because he's just a super talented actor. Love him getting his Flowers, him getting to take over the world, getting like awards nominations, but also him getting something he's never had in like nerd credibility points, which is excellent.
Bullseye,
Love
excuse you.
Christina, yeah. Love Kristen Milioti. She's forever
Yes.
been that person from that thing, you know what I mean? And she's great in all the roles you think of, and you're like, yeah, I really like her, but you've never thought about her for longer than 10 seconds because that's the parts
Mm.
that she plays. But now she just gets this whole like, and like, I really hope we get to see more of her. We don't know how things end, you know, but whatever. But like, I really hope we get to see more of her because she deserves to. She deserves to be in it. Absolutely brilliant. Everyone nailed it. I could go through the entire cast, but we did. We did a show for it, so listen to that. The Penguin nailed it. This was my number one. Like you said, for about 2 weeks, because I watched that and I'm like, did I just watch the best? That I like that more. And what I liked about it more as well, last bit in the Penguin is the last episode. Love when a
Yes.
season ends on the best episode. Doesn't have to happen. I'm okay with being the second to last episode. Doesn't always have to be the second last episode. I'm okay with like the third episode being the incredible episode.
Mm.
But I do like it when a finale absolutely knocks us off,
Yeah.
knocks
So I think
everybody out
I
of the
think we
park on
got
time.
you got told like, oh, watch out for episode 4 in the
Yeah,
Penguin. And it's phenomenal. But yeah, the finale just nailed
yeah.
everything as well. And
But
it
then
just
you're
stuck the
kind of
landing.
like, oh, obviously the finale isn't great then. You know what I mean? Whereas the finale is the episode and it ties everything up and it's just perfect and leaves us with that like on that high
Yeah.
afterwards. Yeah, it's really good. And it was, and I'm like, that's not gonna get beat because Shogun wasn't gonna get beat, and this just beat Shogun. What the fuck? And then a little show, we've spoken about it already. Some people might remember my number one show of the year. And when I saw it, I knew it was from episode one of watching this show, and it just got better and better and better. And I'm so fucking happy it is. It's Say Nothing. Best show of the year.
Okay. I'm only 2 episodes into this.
I'm not going to give you away anything. Don't worry.
Yeah.
You are my litmus test for no spoilers. Okay.
Okay.
You give my job stakes now to not spoil anything here. Although, kind of history. Like,
Yeah.
spoiler alert, Jerry Adams doesn't die.
Except if it's Quentin Tarantino,
A
maybe
fucking
making this.
Terminator, like, yeah. But what makes this number one is this is just another level because between this and another project I'm going to discuss when we look at 2024 at the movies, what I love is finally, for me at least, we've learned how to tell stories about the troubles and recent Irish past, which there has been great projects before, but they kind of get clouded and biased. Like if you think of Michael Collins, you think of he's the hero and Dev is a sneaky little villain played by Alan Rickman. Or the opposite is true if you watch The Wind That Shakes the Barley. Depending on who's telling the story, the IRA are either heroic freedom fighters fighting evil Brits or they're evil terrorists wrecking communities. And it's because we're so emotionally entangled with it because so much of it is still stuff we're reckoning with and people who are involved in it are still alive. And that's true of everything here, but there just seems to be literally over the past year with the couple of projects, this and the project I'm going to discuss, the movie, which you could probably guess, but I'm going to leave it for next week anyway. But why I was agnostic towards so many of these stories was all of the above is true. Michael Collins is a hero. Maybe he also fucked up negotiations. Dev is someone that Ireland couldn't be what we know it to be these days without him, and he is pivotal in like kind of a very important history of our lives, but he's also pivotal in making Ireland a place that maybe we don't want it to be as well today,
Mhm.
and there's a legacy there. The IRA did stand for, you know, a valiant kind of cause that did deserve to be addressed in certain ways, but how they did it many times was absolutely atrocious and like had real life impact on people and devastation. And there's a hypocrisy there as well, where the IRA has killed more Irish civilians than the British Army that certain people just don't want to look at. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I don't want to acknowledge that fact. And all of those things are all true at the same time. It's complicated. It's messy. And we've never been able to tell this story properly in a way that summed all of that up. What Say Nothing is interested in is that complexity of it. And the truth, with no bias, this is the truth of what happens. It is empathy for all sides while also being totally unafraid to hold everyone involved to account for what they've done. If you haven't watched it or heard it yet, you really need to get on it. It's fantastic. It follows the Price sisters, who are real life dolars, and Marion Price, real life, well known Republican members of the IRA, one of which is actually launching defamation action on the show. I won't get into the hows, the whys, the whats, but they made a big, like, baby reindeer style decision on it that you're like, I don't know if you can do that when you watch it, and you're like, holy shit. But like at the same time, by following them, we get kind of an unprecedented look into a side of history we've just not seen before, like due to the approach of those involved to say nothing, hence the show's title. And what a story it is. The show takes us into the mix of the London bombings. It takes us through Gerry Adams' rise to power. It shows us what life is like living through a hunger strike. In the very first scene of the show, we go into the home of Jean McConville the night she was taken from her family. And you're like, oh shit, we're in it. We're getting there. We're talking about all the big stuff. The show pulls no punches. If anything, like I said about the legal action, you probably feel that they should have points. You probably feel maybe just talk that through with a lawyer. Talk it through with a lawyer just once. But it is an absolutely incredible watch. On one hand, and this is what I mean about it, okay? This is why I love the complexity of it all, okay? Because you grow to be charmed and fascinated by the Price sisters and many of the other big characters that are in this, while also being totally appalled at some of the things they were involved in, while also at the same time understanding exactly why they did it and empathizing with it. So you see all sides here. We see the British Army strategy of trying to break the IRA, and like this isn't a spoiler, but it is one plot point that like kind of just felt like dropped and left aside. It was really interesting, and I'm just like, oh, like what happened there? Like I only realized afterwards. I'm like, oh, we just never got back to that. You know what I mean? And like we take the story from this, it starts in the 60s, like with flashbacks and whatnot, right up until the ceasefires and the birth of the provisional IRA. They go into all of it. And one thing I loved about the show as well, though, was despite the serious subject matter, and it reminded me a little bit of Derry Girls in this thing, which wasn't afraid to tackle difficult subjects, but also
I was gonna say, yeah, that was definitely a show that I think really opened up the troubles to the
yes,
rest
I
of the world, I
agree.
think, as well. Yeah.
I'd add that to this list as well.
Yeah.
But one thing I liked about this is it's fucking fun to watch at times too. Okay, like the crimes committed by the IRA throughout this period in time were fucking horrific. And at the same time, in saying that, right, you can't help but go, geez, it would make for a fucking good story. Like if you heard that story down the pub, you know what I mean? Like it's like, how did they do it? What did they do? Essentially, they're fighting a war in plain sight on the streets of Belfast. They're couch hopping with neighbors friendly to the cause who have guns in their kitchen presses just in case, not able to sleep in the same bed 2 nights in a row because they're chasing the British. Fucking madness. And the domesticity of it all is what makes it thrilling, because at the same time, like, it does tell those stories. And it's like, that's mad. These people are meeting up in warehouses and taking on the British Army. But also, they're not the underdog heroes of it all. Are they the villains or are the British the villains? But I think both are the villains. But who do I cheer for? How do I like? And the show's not going to answer that. It's not going to tell you who to like. You just have to absorb it all, you know?
Yeah.
But it also never glamorizes it. It gets into the stories of it. And what it never forgets is that there was normal people like Jean McConville just trying to get along with life as normal as possible, raising her kids throughout all of this. But she just happened to live at a time and in a place where the troubles eventually came to your doorstep, and often in the worst way, whether you wanted to or not. The cast is an absolute murderer's row of both recognizable names and soon to be superstars. You've got Tom Von Lawler, of course, Nidge from Love Hate, playing one of Jerry Adams' closest lieutenants in the later years of his life. You've got Maxine Peake playing an older Dolores. You've got Rory Kinnear playing British Commander Frank Kitson, one of my favorite portrayals in the show. Absolutely fantastic. While you've got Chernobyl's Michael Colgan taking the reins, note perfectly as an older Jerry Adams from The Gentleman's Just Finan, who plays him when he's younger. But it's the two sisters in their pomp who steal the show. Lola Pettigrew is magnetic as the younger Dolores. You can totally, you just buy into her as a character because you just see how charming she is because of the screen presence of Lola. And I was fucking delighted. Hazel Dupe, who plays Marion when she's younger, is one of my favorite young actresses on the scene. She was the star of You Are Not My Mother. It was my second favorite movie of, I think, 2022. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Treat yourself. Irish horror movie, one of the best horror movies I've seen in the past 20 years.
How the hell have I not seen that?
And it's Marion Price. Young Marion Price is playing the lead role. She is phenomenal in it. It traumatized me, but it's phenomenal.
You Are Not My Mother.
You Are Not My Mother. Brilliant.
Okay.
She's one of my favorite young actresses, and she just nailed Marion, because Marion is just a character who just surprises you constantly. Because we meet her and we're like, oh, she's just a quiet sister, and she's so much more than that. And there is no one better that, like, again, as a fan of Hazel, I'm just like, there's actually no one better to play that character, because she can just hit all of those different notes at different times and she knocks it out of the park. She's going to be in fucking Marvel movies. Like, she's that good. And we're just seeing her like kind of get her big role that kind of announce herself to the world. I managed to somewhat ration this and restrict myself to 2 episodes a night over the course of a week. And it felt like an absolute fucking gift to get to them at the end of the day. I love that feeling. And I just didn't have that feeling with anything else this year. Not in a bad way. I loved all the shows that were in my top 10 and beyond. But I was just like, oh my God, I saved this for the last thing that I did at night. And I got everything else out of the way. And I'm like, I get to watch 2 episodes of Say Nothing now. Fuck me, life is good. The show was perfect and it had everything. I had a clear story about a complex issue. It'll make you cry your fucking eyes out. It'll make you laugh. It's thrilling. Every episode in this feels unique. Every episode is, do you know the way, again, we're talking about it, where it's like, oh, episode 3 is the one you want to watch. Episode 5, episode 8, oh, it's the finale. Every episode is, oh, it's that one. And you just go, oh, fuck me, that was great. Oh, it's the one with the bombings. Oh, fuck me, that was great. Oh, it's the one in prison. Oh, fuck me, that was great. Every episode is 10 out of 10. There's no one signature episode. They're all incredible. From episode 1, I was genuinely like I said, is this the best show of the year? And as I was watching it, I kept asking myself, is it just because I'm Irish? Is it just because it's on Disney? Like, am I being biased here because I want this show to succeed? And like, it has people I like in it, and I'm fascinated by the story, and I'm invested in telling the true story of the Troubles. But by the end of every episode, I'd just be beaming and swelling with pride and going, this is the best show of the year. This is nothing in the top 10 has hit me like that episode hit me. And they just kept doing it over and over again. There wasn't a show I enjoyed more minute to minute this year. And there are some great shows that I loved on this list. But in every one, I can point to a minute or a scene. I picked up my phone, or I felt a bit disconnected, or I'm like, oh, I don't know about that decision, or just one tiny thing where there's an imperfection there, even if I loved it. Okay. I got none of that here. Every second had me. It was incredible, and it legitimately changed the way I feel about the Troubles. I'm not going to get into politics, but it changed how I felt about Irish history as a whole. Out fucking standing. Say nothing. Say everything about the show. It's fantastic. I loved it. I loved it. Kev, we did it.
We did it.
A year full of TV.
Yeah, year full of TV. And then we got 2025 now to look forward to.
Just the 3 hours. Just a casual 3-hour show.
Do you know what? I think last year, because we had so many similar stuff on our lists, and I think there was a few different ones this year. I think we probably just took maybe a little bit more time chatting about stuff, but
Kev, 3 hours spent talking with TV with you is as good as, well, no, I'd rather watch 3 hours of say nothing if I'm honest, but I just love the show. That's nothing to do with you, but I'm honest. That's 3 hours well spent for me.
Yeah, man, me too. Absolute delight every time we do this. So yeah, can't wait. I can't wait for next year as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And there's going to be loads more TV discussions. We've got Severance back early next year.
Yes.
There's new Stranger
there's
Things.
new trailer came out for that. New Stranger Things.
There's a lot to look forward to. New new Game of Thrones spin-off, like we said. There's a lot to look forward to next year.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm sure we're going to be discussing it all. So looking forward to that. Before we wrap up though, last time we'll be chatting before the new year. So anything you got to plug? Or if there's nothing you got to plug, if you're having a bit of downtime, Mr. Renton, that you just want to give a shout out to and just call out.
I've not really to plug at the moment, actually. Oh, I don't know, man.
You're
I
just
think
looking around the room for things you like.
I am. I'm like,
I got a new like extension lead.
I fucking did not. Literally yesterday, I got a new extension.
I'm happy for you, man. I'm happy for you. Where did you get the extension lead? How much was it? Like, what are we talking here?
In one of those deal shops. It's a 5 meter extension lead.
149, a tenner.
Yeah.
In the deals.
Yeah.
They've changed, man.
I know.
Ever since 149, you had one job. Like, that's
No, I will plug this. Common Side Effects is one to watch out for next year as a TV show. Okay. Same creators as Scavenger's Reign, but it looks more like I think I've talked about this before, but like more of like a detective comedy kind of show, but it looks absolutely phenomenal and I cannot wait for that show. It's one of my ones that I'm really, really looking forward to.
Okay, excellent. I'm looking forward to catching up on some of your recommendations here, Kev. Always a pleasure. Follow Kev. We'll have all the links to his socials online anywhere you see this show mentioned. So absolute pleasure.
Go stream Fan Club as well, any chance you get, because we always appreciate the streams. Thank you.
Go listen to Fan Club. Some absolute bangers. Treat yourself and go listen
Treat yourself. If you ever just want to get hyped up and maybe depressed at the same time.
I love being depressed and hyped up. I'm like, oh, I have all this energy. I'm going to put it into this pillow. But like hardcorely. No, it's not.
Wait till it's raining, go out for your run and kind of just have an emotional moment. This is the Fan Club. There you go.
Yeah, that's a good vibe. That's a vibe. And then go see them live as well. But keep an eye on the socials anyway. Follow Fan Club too. Kev, thanks so much for joining us. Later this week on page 180, Kento's going to be returning for our final sports catch up of the years. We preview the World Darts Championship among
Cannot wait.
things. Until then, thank you, Kev, again for joining us. I've been Jared Leggett. This has been page 180. And is that a spud gun?